Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you have found your seat, and I would like to tell you that you have interpretation in 3 languages: German, English, and French. So you choose 1 for German, 2 for English, 3 for French. And I have a little note here: speak slowly. That's what I'm trying to do, even if you speakers will be a little under pressure, because I will be very strict about timing. So speaking fast doesn't help interpreters at all, and doesn't help people who listen at all, because then the interpretation gets... So this was the technical start for all of you. I'm happy that you are here. My name is Hannes Lorenz, and I'm a moderator for this session. I see a lot of familiar faces. I remember when it all started with seeds and biodiversity and seeds fit for organic farming and sustainable production. I remember when the Parliament in the 90s for the first time said we have to do something about conservation and sustainable use of the biodiversity, the genetic diversity in agriculture. The reaction from the Commission was, well, we need to ask the competent authorities about this. And that's mainly people who have been in research, who know from research what genetic diversity means. I think that has substantially changed. And I think the authorities about the future of agriculture that is adapted to climate change and biodiversity loss are here in this room. The authority is in practice, the authority is in being serious about the challenges that agriculture is facing. And what we do today at this conference is to look at the possibilities that lie ahead of us concerning legislation, the framework for dealing, developing, saving, using genetic diversity in agriculture, and specifically making agriculture fit for the challenges we are facing. So it is about the right legislation that is coming up. The Commission is preparing a new framework. You might remember in 2013, the Commission faced quite some opposition from the Parliament. It was at the end of a legislative period that the Parliament said, well, changing the existing seed marketing laws this way the Commission is proposing is not enough. And there was a broad majority of rejecting that proposal. The Commission had to withdraw in 2015. And now we are in the very exciting moment of the Commission preparing a new proposal for seed marketing legislation. I think it is important to say that there has been, meanwhile, some kind of preparation for that change, and that was the reform of legislation on organic farming, because in that legislation, heterogeneous material, organic seeds, the development of specifically bred seeds for sustainable farming practices, organic farming, became a major issue in the negotiations. And it was a kind of door opener, I think, to look at the importance of seeds that are adapted to the challenges I was mentioning. And this will be our main regard this afternoon, looking at the opportunity of that new legislation, of course, at challenges which arise from existing laws and interests, but also the engagement of people like you who have been working for a long time in this field. So we hope we can bring all this together this afternoon. And of course, this is not just this moment. It is networking, it's cooperation, it's working together for the future on this issue. I will shortly introduce to you our program of the afternoon. It's quite a packed program, but I think it's important that you you are aware, we will start with an introduction to the EU seed marketing reform. So with the preparation of this new that's the second part of it. And then we will have a question and answer session. And afterwards, the second part will be for the marketing of varieties and populations for organic and low input agriculture. That's a very important thing because varieties were considered for a long time as something that is specifically linked to uniformity and so on. Now we are already discussing organic varieties. I remember that was a pretty critical point during negotiations on the organic regulation. It's not anymore, that's my feeling. You correct me perhaps later. So we are organic farming. After that session, we will look into active and engaged in this field. In fact, I see all those who have been with us in the negotiations on the organic farming regulation. So I would be very interested to hear, I'm out of the machine for some time now, what they think about the development of things. And then we come into the final panel session, which is towards a future-proof and inclusive EU seed marketing legislation for agroecological and organic seeds. Will that be possible? Well, we have a lot of competent authorities at that panel, and we will see how far we get with some kind of conclusions or commitments or whatever. So this is the overview, and now I would like to open this afternoon with inviting Dorothée André from the Commission. She's head of the Plant Health Unit G1. Well, now I had to note it down because I've seen you around quite some time in different functions. So I would like to give you the floor and introduce us to what are these seed marketing laws, why are they there, why is it important to adapt them, to reform them, and what has the Commission in mind in launching it. Dorothée, it's yours, the floor.
Okay, somebody starts the thing?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much, Hannes Lorentzen, for inviting us here. And indeed, there are some people known around the table, and I'm pleased to present to you a bit the purpose of the actual present legislation and our objectives for the future. Obviously, the objective is not that it's withdrawn and rejected by the Parliament, so I hope this time will be the good time. So, it starts well.
Oops. Perhaps you have, I don't know in which direction you have to try it. No?
Well,
it should be on.
Yes, it's green.
It's green, it's on, it looks very nice. Yeah, here we go.
Where did you put?
I put there, but maybe somebody else did it. But looks good. Can you all see that on the screens?
This looks good. So, the Union legislation on plant and forest reproductive material is a legislation which has a certain number of directives, some very old, some less. So we have 6 which concern plant species and vegetable, 1 directive on the common catalogue, and 4 directives on the marketing of propagating material other than seeds. So we have vegetables, fruit plants, wine, and ornamental plants. A lot of implementing acts also linked to this, and the annual market by 15 billion euro. Now, let us see. Yes, it's working now. So what is this legislation about? So it's about the production, the marketing, and the import of plant material. It ensures also the identity, the quality, and the health of this material. And let me say that we do regulate only the most economically important species. The legislation is based on 2 pillars. The first one is about variety registration. So we have what we call distinctness, uniformity, stability, and we have also value for cultivation and use. Also denomination. And the second pillar is about certification and of the material. So there are rules about packaging, sealing, lot size, and all this. In principle, only certified seeds and can be put on the market. And, well, we do also have some other type of categories, but the forest has specific rules, specific production and long-term plantation, let us say like this. And we do also have rules about imports. So the basic principle being that we are recognizing equivalence if everything is similar to the EU legislation. To put it simply, what is not included in the seed legislation is everything which has to do with plant variety protection. It's another legislation, and it's about intellectual property rights and breeders' right. But this is not part of this legislation, and it's often mixed. So let me just highlight that it's not here that we are going to solve anything related to plant varieties rights. Now, what we do have, wait, because here seems, qu'est-ce que c'est que cette histoire?
It's always an adventure. I find it's wonderful technology, but it's always a little adventure. I think you have to put it to the right. But I don't know in which direction you have to. Here it is.
Okay.
Next one.
Yeah.
There.
Okay.
This one.
Okay.
Good.
So we do have some rules which, as you said previously, are related to some diverse material. So we had in the past conservation varieties. And which derogate from the normal rules, and we, with some also specification as regards the region of origin and the quantities. Then we have also introduced, still in this legislation, some temporary experiment for populations. This was done in 2014. Then came, as you said, the organic regulation. And with this, we have adopted delegated regulation on organic heterogeneous material. And this brought this concept of heterogeneous material into reality. And I think it was a long process, but good result. Then we had also this recommendation to develop rules for organic varieties suitable for organic production, and we are working on it, and we do have some, well, we should adopt soon some new provisions and derogation to the normal distinctness, uniformity, stability criteria, and also for value for cultivation and use, which should make this possible. It's a list of some species, can be extended, but I think this was also a very interesting process. So diversity and organic rules are coming more in and in. Okay. Now, so what we have to do now, we are going to revise the legislation, but first question is to ask yourself, is everything bad? No. What we got from the consultation is that there is agreement that the legislation ensure that identity, health, and quality is good and that we have a competitive sector. But as we have to recognize, this regulation dates from some time, some from the 60s. So obviously, the objectives were not the same. Productivity, we are not going to say now that with the Ukraine invasion, we are not concerned about food security and self-sufficiency, but nevertheless, we also have some other objectives which are becoming more and more relevant. It's to try to mitigate the biodiversity loss, try to adapt to climate change, and have a sustainable food production. So we have the Green Deal and all the relevant legislation. And now what we have to achieve is that we propose something which fits with this European Green Deal objectives and strategies, has to be coherent with some existing legislation. It has to be going in parallel to other initiatives which are being discussed for the time being. And obviously, we are working in an international environment. Okay. So, in other words, that's the general context. And in April 2021, the Commission submitted a study to the Council and to the Parliament on the options to update the legislation. And the study identified problems which needed to be addressed in the revision, the problems which had been identified before, but also new ones because of the new objectives. So all this biodiversity loss, sustainability, and climate change. So we have published an inception impact assessment. We got a feedback on it, and then we have done an open public consultation. A contractor is working for us on this, and the preliminary outcome is that overall the system has been working properly. However, there is certainly room for improvement, adjustment, new objectives, and the views are quite diverse, I should say. Okay, so problems. We have identified 4 types of problems. The first one being that there are different conditions across the member states. The second one is that there is a disproportionate burden for certain products. So that the same rules more or less apply to all products, while there should be differentiation. There is a reduced efficiency and effectiveness of the processes and procedures, and we cannot adapt easily to development in science and technology, leading to opportunities which are lost. And then the last one, it is not aligned properly or sufficiently to the Green Deal objectives, and so this has to be adjusted. Okay. Now, there are 4 general objectives. I will go through them quickly. So the first one is to ensure a level playing field in the EU. The second one is to ensure a wide diversity of choice and quality for all types of users and consumers. Third general objective is support innovation and competitiveness. And the last one is to contribute to the wider objectives like climate change, food security, and sustainable production. Okay. So we do have, yes, I'm nearly done. we do have we are working on the different problems, and we are trying to find different options. This is a range of specific measures which go from high flexibility to high harmonization. And for this, as I said before, we are going to keep the two pillars, which is variety registration and certification. And the forest should be different, but for other aspects, we should try to find the options which better fit. So for organic regulation and heterogeneous material, we are going to look at different options, how to make the system more adapted to the needs. For conservation varieties, you are interested in this, we are going to look also to the current system, which is criticized for being too burdensome and too restrictive. So we are going to look at different options, in particular also to delete some of the restrictions. For the adapted varieties, we are also going to look again at the rules. And one of the elements which is also going to be addressed is the exchange in kind between farmers. Here again, different options are being considered. And so that's what is being studied in the impact assessment. Okay, next step. Well, next step is the completion of the impact assessment and the Commission proposal. And our objective is to achieve this by the end of this year. So it's in the Commission Work Programme 2022. And then once it's adopted, we will be coming to the Council and the Parliament to discuss the proposals and hopefully have something which is more fit to the current objectives and to the current environment, and to really review this old-dated legislation, which did good things but can be improved, that's for sure. And so we are happy to listen today to what we hear, and we are very happy to continue this process in the future. We are trying to see a maximum of people and organizations as much as we can. Our door is open. We hope that you all provide comments to our contractor, that we can integrate these comments in the impact assessment, because it can only be as good as the input we got. In order to know where we go, we need input. We have some ideas, and it's always good to confront them. So we are happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. André. You have the privilege of looking back into history and into the future, and having been, on this file for a longer period. So being optimistic is not just, a kind of nice word, but after an experience which made you perhaps not too optimistic, now as things have changed, there seems to be ground for optimism. And the invitation to work now on this together with a wide range of stakeholders is not only empty in the sense it is a timely moment, because the difficulty we see very often is that legislative proposals run after reality, like Green Deal running after CAP reform. You remember CAP reform was already decided when the Commission brought out the Green Deal. And now everybody says, well, it's not really aligned to the Green Deal what CAP is, but it's for the next 7 years. So now, with this legislation, it's different. It is something that has to align to the Green Deal, and you see the difficulties of aligning to the Green Deal, and I think that's the point we have to make. So very good. I think it's good to make a jump into the first session of giving, comments and putting it into context what the Commission has just proposed. And I'm happy to announce Christophe Gollet from the Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law, and you have worked on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and Other People Working in Rural Areas. And I think that context is extremely important, because if we stay too technical on a legislation, we lose scope of what does that mean for those who are most concerned with it, and that's farmers and peasants, and those have mainly been in difficulties in the past. So how and I think that's the question to you, is the exchange and sale of seeds by farmers and peasants, how could that reform implement what is written and adopted in the UN Declaration on farmers and peasants' rights? So, Christophe Gollet, you have the floor. Thank you for being here.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. C'est un plaisir d'être ici avec vous. Donc, en effet, l'Académie est depuis 4 ans dans un projet de recherche avec des partenaires européens sur le droit aux semences en Europe. On a participé à toutes les consultations de la Commission européenne dans les derniers mois. Il y a une publication qui est disponible ici, un gros manuel en anglais sur le droit aux semences en Europe, et plus un résumé en français, anglais et espagnol sur ces questions. Donc la déclaration sur les droits des paysans a été adoptée en 2018 à Genève et à New York, à l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies. En 2018, le Parlement européen a appelé les États européens à soutenir l'adoption de la déclaration. Donc on est très heureux de revenir ici au Parlement, institution qui a soutenu ce processus. À l'Assemblée générale, l'Union européenne était très divisée au moment du vote, même si l'Assemblée générale a voté à une très grande majorité pour la déclaration. L'Europe était divisée. Il y a des États qui ont voté pour, le Portugal, Luxembourg, des États qui ont voté contre, Hongrie, Suède, et il y a eu 23 abstentions. Ce qui est important de comprendre dans le système des Nations Unies, c'est qu'une résolution de l'Assemblée générale, il y a quand même une obligation de mise en œuvre de bonne foi, même si on n'a pas forcément voté pour. Dans la résolution de l'Assemblée générale, elle demande à tous les États de mettre en œuvre la déclaration. Voilà, on ne fait pas une distinction dans la résolution de l'Assemblée générale selon le vote des États. Ensuite, il faut savoir que la déclaration est basée sur du droit contraignant. Le droit à l'alimentation, par exemple, qui est dans le pacte sur les droits économiques, sociaux et culturels, est contraignant pour tous les États de l'Union européenne. Et il y a eu, depuis 2018, un grand nombre de décisions déjà, au niveau national, régional et international, qui ont interprété du droit contraignant, comme le droit à l'alimentation, en incluant le droit à la terre et le droit aux semences. Donc je n'ai pas le temps en 5 minutes de tout expliquer, mais il y a par exemple une décision du Comité des droits de l'homme qui surveille les droits civils et politiques aux Nations Unies et qui a été une convention qui a été ratifiée par tous les États membres de l'Union européenne. Et le Comité des droits de l'homme a interprété les droits civils et politiques à travers la déclaration. L'année passée, la Cour suprême du Honduras a annulé une loi qu'on a appelée la loi Monsanto parce qu'elle violait le droit à l'alimentation et le droit aux semences au Honduras en se basant sur la déclaration. Mais voilà. Donc ce droit, une déclaration en soi n'est pas contraignante, mais elle est interprétée, elle interprète le droit contraignant. Et donc quand on parle de droit à l'alimentation en Europe, de droit à l'alimentation des paysans et paysannes, on ne peut pas dire que ça n'inclut pas le droit aux semences et le droit, par exemple, à la terre. Maintenant, je lis avec vous l'article 19 de la déclaration qui donc est sur le droit aux semences. Ce droit inclut le droit à la protection des savoirs traditionnels relatifs aux semences, le droit de participer équitablement au partage des avantages, le droit de participer à la prise de décision sur les questions liées aux semences, le droit de conserver, d'utiliser, d'échanger et de vendre des semences de ferme ou du matériel de multiplication, le droit de perpétuer, contrôler, protéger, développer les semences paysannes et les savoirs traditionnels. Il est aussi dit que les États doivent prendre des mesures pour appuyer les systèmes de semences paysannes et favoriser l'utilisation des semences paysannes et l'agrobiodiversité. Et le dernier paragraphe de cet article 19.8, les États veilleront à ce que les politiques concernant les semences, les lois relatives à la protection des obtentions végétales et les autres lois concernant la propriété intellectuelle, les systèmes de certification et les lois sur la commercialisation des semences respectent et prennent en compte les droits, les besoins et les réalités des paysans. Donc c'est très explicite, l'article 19.8 de la Déclaration des Nations Unies fait même référence aux lois sur la commercialisation des semences. Et donc il faudrait prendre en compte ces droits et besoins des paysans et paysannes dans la révision de ces législations. Dans les contributions qu'on a fait aux consultations de la Commission européenne, on a dit que l'approche, l'option qui était la plus à même d'être en conformité était l'option 2, que ce serait bien qu'il y ait une reconnaissance des semences paysannes et des systèmes de semences paysannes, que le droit d'échanger les semences paysannes soit reconnu et que même le droit de vendre les semences paysannes soit aussi reconnu, que ce soit avec une certification, avec des critères adaptés, ce serait le mieux. Voilà. Voilà quelques mots pour mettre dans le contexte un peu global, avec un lien avec cette réforme sur les semences. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Follet. And especially for staying within 5 minutes. It's a vast issue to deal with, and you made it very clear in a very short time. I think, yes, that's the first message. It's not just a question of plant breeders' rights or exceptions. It's a more general question. How do we deal with not only with the rights, but also with the role of farmers of assuring food security? And how do we do that? And it is linked to rights and to possibilities. So it's not excluding, you mentioned before, we are not dealing with, that question, but we have, of course, to deal with the general situation in which farmers find themselves. So thank you very much for making that point. I suppose Guy Castler, who will be the next one from European Coordination Via Campesina, will take this point up because you are a peasant, you are a member of the Confédération Paysanne in France and the European Coordination Via Campesina. You've been dealing, and I know that because I know you since a long time, also with the question of GMO seeds and what that means for farmers. And you have always insisted that the scale of small farmers is very much linked to their knowledge about seeds, but also their engagement to deal with their seeds, to exchange between farmers. So I think that's your point. At least that's what I know from you. You are the next speaker, Guy, and happy to have you here.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, et je voudrais d'abord remercier les organisateurs et les parlementaires qui ont mouillé leur chemise pour qu'on puisse avoir cet échange aujourd'hui qui me paraît fort utile dans le contexte actuel. Alors, c'est difficile pour un paysan d'aborder une seule réglementation. Moi, dans mon champ, la réglementation commercialisation s'applique, mais la réglementation sanitaire s'applique, celle des OGM, celle de la propriété intellectuelle. Enfin, je pourrais vous en faire une liste comme ça. Et il est vraiment dommage que la Commission, les institutions européennes, c'est pas que la Commission, les institutions européennes travaillent en silo, une réglementation après l'autre. Nous avons affaire à tout à la fois et les interactions entre les réglementations sont très importantes. Mais je me plierai à l'ordre du jour et en resterai donc à cette réglementation commercialisation. Donc aujourd'hui, nous avons un défi que nous rappelons depuis longtemps, mais merci au Pacte vert de nous le rappeler. Il est urgent de sortir totalement de la dépendance aux énergies fossiles et à leurs produits que sont les engrais chimiques et les pesticides chimiques. Ils ne sont plus supportables. Je ne vais pas vous développer les raisons, vous les connaissez tous. Pour répondre à ce défi, les systèmes semenciers paysans, ce que nous appelons les systèmes semenciers paysans, est un des outils les plus performants pour rapidement adapter les plantes qui sont des organismes, des êtres vivants si elles ne sont pas adaptées à leur environnement, ben, ma foi, elles tombent malades et puis elles ne produisent plus. Si l'environnement, c'est les engrais chimiques et les pesticides, on peut les sélectionner au laboratoire ou dans les stations pour les engrais chimiques et les pesticides. Mais s'il faut compter que sur les ressources locales, c'est-à-dire le sol, le climat, tous les micro-organismes, les insectes qui sont présents dans chaque terroir, dans chacune de nos localités, il faut les sélectionner et les produire localement. Et on ne peut choisir les plantes qui sont les mieux adaptées aux conditions locales de culture que si on les cultive et qu'on observe tout au long de l'année nos champs et on dira « Ah, mais tel arbre, ah oui, celui-là, il produit, il n'est pas malade. » Alors que l'autre à côté, il n'est pas malade, mais il ne produit pas, donc il ne m'intéresse pas. Et pareil pour les carottes ou les champs de blé. Et donc cette sélection paysanne aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas pour enlever le travail de tous ceux qui travaillent pour l'industrie semencière. Mais aujourd'hui, il faut sélectionner et produire les semences localement dans le champ des paysans. C'est le seul moyen de les adapter aux conditions locales sans engrais chimiques et surtout de les adapter aussi à l'amplification des variations climatiques. Tous ces chocs climatiques que vivent nos plantes aujourd'hui, elles souffrent et plus que nous encore, parce que nous, on peut faire marcher la climatisation, mais pas les chambres, pas les plantes. Des plantes qui sont localement adaptées et qui sont diversifiées, ont une grande capacité, une grande résilience pour s'adapter au changement climatique. Des plantes qui ne sont pas localement adaptées n'ont aucune résilience et ne peuvent pas s'adapter à ces changements climatiques. Et la base des systèmes semenciers paysans, c'est pouvoir reproduire sa récolte, conserver ses semences, les échanger et les vendre. Parce que si on ne peut pas échanger nos semences, on n'arrive pas à renouveler suffisamment et à entretenir et même à amplifier la diversité du stock semencier local et la résilience, donc la capacité d'adaptation de nos semences au changement, elle est liée à cette diversité. Donc je salue quand même le travail qui a été fait par Christophe et tous ses collègues et la Via Campesina pour obtenir cette déclaration. Aujourd'hui, c'est la réponse aux défis posés par le Pacte vert en ce qui concerne les semences. Alors, j'irai directement aux conclusions, parce que je sais bien que nous n'avons pas beaucoup de temps, pour dire que, pour la première fois, la Commission nous fait des propositions que nous saluons, mais vraiment grandement. Quand la Commission met comme une option, qui n'est pas encore retenue, pour nous c'est évident qu'elle ne peut être que retenue, elle est déjà appliquée partout, dans tous les pays de l'Europe, qui est de sortir les systèmes semenciers paysans et les échanges entre agriculteurs de la réglementation semences qui, elle, est faite pour le marché global, pour la commercialisation de grandes quantités de semences qui n'ont pas été sélectionnées localement, donc qui présentent des risques de mauvaise adaptation. Gérons ces risques avec la réglementation de la commercialisation, mais pour les systèmes semenciers paysans, on ne peut pas rentrer dans cette réglementation, elle est contraire à nos pratiques. Donc ça, c'est la première chose. Mais je voudrais saluer une deuxième initiative de la Commission, qui est de faire la même proposition pour ce que vous appelez les réseaux de biodiversité, semences paysannes, maisons de semences paysannes chez nous. Nous, quand nous avons perdu, on a eu plus d'un demi-siècle d'agriculture industrielle, nous avons perdu et nos semences traditionnelles et nos savoir-faire, nos pratiques, nos connaissances sur la sélection et la production de semences. Nous sommes quelques-uns à les retrouver, nous échangeons, nous grossissons, mais nous avons besoin de tous ces amateurs, de toutes ces petites entreprises, et je pense que j'en ai deux là qui sont à côté de moi, vont s'exprimer après, ont conservé ce que n'ont pas fait les paysans. Une grande diversité, notamment parmi les semences potagères et les arbres fruitiers. Sur les grandes cultures, on va plutôt voir les banques de gènes. Et là, je voudrais saluer les chercheurs qui nous accompagnent, qui nous permettent de retrouver des semences traditionnelles dans les banques de gènes. Celles-là, on peut les sélectionner pour les adapter à nos pratiques, alors que les plantes qui ont été sélectionnées pour l'engrais chimique et pour les pesticides, c'est difficile de les sélectionner pour les adapter à nos pratiques. Donc, ces deux exceptions, c'est le point fondamental pour nous. Ensuite, nous sommes aussi, les systèmes semenciers paysans ne sont pas généralisés, donc nous sommes aussi, et pour un certain temps encore, acheteurs de semences sur le marché. Parce que bon, chaque année, il faut semer, et là, nous sommes très demandeurs d'une augmentation de la diversité de l'offre commerciale semencière. Et là, je salue le travail qui a été fait sur le matériel hétérogène biologique. Bon, nous, on appelle ça des populations. On n'aime pas appeler des êtres vivants du matériel. C'est notre langage, à chacun son langage, mais les juristes ont le droit d'avoir leur langage. Mais c'est une avancée. Par contre, je voudrais un petit peu me porter à faux de ce que certains disent. Ce n'est pas une fenêtre qui permet aux paysans de vendre leurs semences. Parce que si on veut vendre du matériel hétérogène biologique, il faut qu'on respecte la réglementation de commercialisation des semences, qu'on s'enregistre, qu'on fasse de la bureaucratie, qu'on contrôle, et surtout qu'on sélectionne nos semences en dehors du champ où on produit nos récoltes. Puisque les semences commercialisées, il faut isoler la parcelle de production de semences pour offrir toutes les garanties de pureté, d'homogénéité et sanitaire. Nous, la base des semences paysannes, c'est qu'elles sont sélectionnées dans la récolte. Donc, bravo à cette initiative, bravo à d'autres initiatives de diversité qui vont dans le même sens. Je voudrais par contre soulever quelques interrogations que nous posent les propositions de la Commission européenne. Alors, une minute, je vais uniquement les citer. Nous ne cultivons pas des molécules ni des gènes. Nous cultivons des plantes entières. La caractérisation des plantes par la numérisation des caractères moléculaires, ça ne dit rien aux paysans, ça peut intéresser ceux qui déposent des brevets, mais ça n'intéresse pas du tout les paysans. Nous voulons une caractérisation des semences à partir de les caractères phénotypiques. La deuxième chose, durabilité des semences. De quoi parlez-vous? On vient de actualiser une directive sur la durabilité de l'usage des pesticides. C'est de cette durabilité-là que vous parlez. Est-ce que c'est la durabilité des monocultures industrielles ou est-ce que ce sont des systèmes d'agriculture paysanne et biologique qui sont une autre forme de durabilité? Ce ne sont pas les semences qui sont durables, ce sont les systèmes agraires. Et une variété qui sera durable dans les systèmes semenciers paysans sera refusée avec les critères des monocultures industrielles, parce que, bon, je n'ai pas le temps de le détailler, et l'inverse aussi. Donc ce critère de durabilité, si vous l'imposez partout, le même critère de durabilité pour toutes les semences, ou vous éliminez l'agriculture industrielle, ou vous éliminez l'agriculture biologique et paysanne. Non, ce sont les systèmes qui sont... Et je voudrais souligner un dernier manque dans cette réglementation, je n'aborderai pas les autres points. Nous avons, nous, besoin de savoir, quand nous achetons des semences, si c'est des OGM ou si ce ne sont pas des OGM. À l'heure actuelle, le catalogue l'indique. Il n'y a pas de raison que demain... Alors, je sais qu'ici, on ne parle pas de la réforme de la réglementation OGM, mais je parle du catalogue. On a besoin, y compris pour les nouvelles techniques de génération, de manipulation génétique, de savoir si on a affaire à des OGM ou non, pour protéger le patrimoine commun que sont nos semences traditionnelles et aussi pour respecter les consommateurs qui ne veulent pas d'OGM. Nous avons aussi besoin, et je conclurai là-dessus, de savoir si, quand nous achetons des semences, elles sont reproductibles ou non. On ne nous dit pas si c'est des hybrides F1 ou si ce n'est pas des hybrides F1. Nous avons besoin de savoir si elles sont couvertes par les droits de propriété intellectuelle, que ce soit des droits d'obtention végétale ou des brevets. Aujourd'hui, nous avons des brevets qui prétendent porter sur des gènes natifs qui sont sur dans nos semences. Donc au moins qu'on sache d'où ils viennent. Et que si une entreprise commercialise des semences brevetées, au moins qu'on sache qu'il y a un brevet, qu'on sache le trouver et qu'on puisse protéger nos semences. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Guy. Tu as soulevé une question que je me pose toujours autour de la discussion sur le pacte vert. Et ça, c'est la question, quelle est l'exception et quelle est la règle? Et la règle, pour le moment, c'est toujours une législation qui a été faite dans les années 60 pour introduire une agriculture plus productive et plus industrialisée à la fin. Donc maintenant, on est dans une situation où on doit revoir tout le contexte. Et le contexte pose des nouvelles questions. Quelle est l'exception et quelle est la règle? Est-ce qu'il faut, parce que c'était toujours l'approche, bon, on reste sur le catalogue, on reste sur ce que l'agriculture industrielle conventionnelle demande et on laisse les niches. Maintenant, ça paraît disparaître. Ce contexte doit être redéfini. Et si on dit on veut des variétés qui sont durables, qui sont locales, qui sont adaptées à tous les changements qui viennent, donc ça doit être autre chose. Ça doit être une autre règle. Et l'exception, c'est peut-être ce qui est en train d'être questionné. Et ça, c'est l'approche industrielle. Si j'ai bien compris, ça, c'était un peu ton message. On ne va pas entrer en discussion, mais ça, c'est mon privilège d'interpréter les choses et on va sûrement revenir à la discussion. I don't want to, sorry, I'm switching language. I don't want to take any time away from Magdalena Prieler of Arche Noah. Arche Noah, most of you know, is a seed savers association in Central Europe, but not only in Central Europe, in all over Europe, I think, present. And the main idea behind the work that exists since many, many years, I would even say decades, is to concentrate on vegetables, not only to save them, but to train people how to save them and how to bring these seeds and these traditional varieties back into the production. And thank you for doing that work, and yours is the floor to explain to us your perspective on the new legislation. Magdalena, you have the floor.
Thanks a lot, Hannes. I'm very honored to be here today speaking, representing a big network, a network of more than 14,500 members, a network of more than 115 individual seed savers and numerous farmers who came together 30 years ago with one vision, with one aim, to really preserve cultivated plant diversity. That's what still we are doing, and now we have one of Europe's biggest private collections. This is quite stable, this work is ongoing and we'll carry it into the future, but now we are more and more also dedicated to really bring this diversity back, to bring this diversity back into the gardens, to bring this diversity back into the fields, and in the end to bring this diversity back onto each citizen's plates, because we want these plates to be diverse again. We want plant-based diets which are really diverse, which are interesting. We want all this taste, this color, these shapes, all of this diversity back again on the plates of every citizen, because we think that this shouldn't be a luxury anymore, but should be a new normal, bringing all of this back. So today I want to talk a bit about, could we maybe have...
Very sorry about that.
And the next one, please. Yes. So today I will mainly talk about the scope of this legislation, because we think it's a very important question, a very important issue to be talked about. But I want to begin with the why. Why is this reform needed from our point of view? We see that the EU seeds marketing legislation has been a driving force for the loss of cultivated plant diversity. So it really contributed to the extinction of a lot of diversity, and that cannot go on. That cannot go on a single day more. We cannot lose any more. We need to reverse this trend. We're very happy that we see that nowadays there is something like a consensus about this. There's a consensus that we should conserve crop diversity, that we should increase its sustainable use. And this for very good reasons. On the one hand, we need to preserve genetic resources for its direct use and also for future breeding. because this is our insurance for the future. On the other hand, we need to increase diversity in the fields to really improve the resilience and the adaptability of our agricultural systems, as it's a crucial tool to support sustainable agroecosystems. And thirdly, as I said in the beginning, we need to increase diversity on our plates again, because that's a recipe for healthy diets. So there's this consensus, and we're very sure that only by getting the seeds laws right, we can build really the basis to get the entire food chain right. So without a foundation, there can be no stable house. Without future-proof seed laws, there can be no sustainable food chain. We need to start there. Therefore, we think it's crucial that the reform really promotes seeds that, owing to their genetic diversity, really facilitate low-input, organic, agroecological farming systems. We need a reform that really respects farmers' and gardeners' rights to seeds. And we need a reform that really kickstarts this transformation into a truly sustainable food system. So we put out some general principles which we think that EU policies really need to take into mind in order to get to this transformation. But I will skip that and directly go to the main points, explaining what we think should change about the scope of this legislation. When you look at the current legislation, as we have it there, we see that the cultivated plant diversity is a strongly restricted exemption. All the system, the entire system is built around and for the needs of an industrial seed system. Everything on the sides, on all sides, is marginalized. There's just very few space left. There's some activities which are outside the scope of the legislation, which haven't been killed, which can still exist in marginal niches. And then there's the niches for diversity, the amateur varieties, the conservation varieties. So some niches were created, but they were kept artificially small, with limits, with production limits, limits to small packages, limits to geographical regions. So all of that in the current legislation has been kept artificially small, which really led and contributed to a huge loss of cultivated plant diversity. This cannot go on like this. In the future legislation, we need an equal footing. We need an equal footing for cultivated plant diversity, which needs to be allowed to be able to live, to be able to be there next to the industrial seed system. So we need really a big part of the field outside the scope of the legislation, and we need an equal footing for diversity cultivars. And what I will talk mostly about, because the next session will be also on diversity cultivars and on marketing regimes, what I will be mostly talking about will be what should be actually outside the scope of this legislation in order to be not restricted anymore by the seed marketing legislation. So as I said, we do not need any more bans on the use of diversity. Therefore, the legislation should not regulate the on-farm and in-garden conservation and the sustainable use and dynamic management of cultivated plant diversity. Therefore, the scope should be strictly delineated by a definition of seed marketing limited to commercial activities targeting professional seed users. So what does that mean for us? It means that exempted from the scope of the seed marketing legislation should be, on the one hand, all activities of seed conservation networks, including all seed savers, hobby gardeners, and farmers. On the other hand, all activities aiming at the maintenance of plant genetic resources or the adaptation of plant genetic resources to agroecological conditions. We need to exclude from the scope of the legislation as well the sale of seeds to amateur gardeners. Also, using farm-safe seeds for one's own cultivation should be excluded, similarly as the exchange of seeds by farmers and gardeners in kind or with monetary compensation. And of course, the passing of seeds for testing, research, breeding purposes. All of that should not be considered seed marketing and should not be restricted by the new legislation. Let me just quickly go into the first point a bit more in depth. What does that mean? What does it mean that we need no more over-regulation of conservation work? I think what is important for everyone to consider in the beginning is that conservation work is diverse. I would even say it's as diverse as the diversity we try to protect and promote. So the settings are very different. In the option 2, which is in the proposal, there's a suggestion to exclude seed conservation networks or certain activities of those networks. But what we see on the ground is a different reality. We see formal and informal entities. We see a lot of organizations which don't have a legal status. We see that there's a lot of individual seed savers. We see often decentralized configurations. Individual seed savers, loose networks, small or medium-sized networks, organizations, membership models, volunteers, corporations. All of that exists there, and all of that is important to really preserve this diversity. So we need to take that in mind when we talk about what should be really outside the scope of this legislation, to really make sure that we regulate on a point where we are down to earth, where we are in our work day to day. All of the different organizations, which I'm very happy that many of them are here today or follow us online. Also, we should keep in mind the rationale of the work of these organizations. Again, it's very different from organization to organization, from individual to individual. But I think what is important to understand is that the exchange and the marketing of PRM is with a primary purpose of conserving and sustainably managing these plant genetic resources, not with the purpose of seed marketing. So that's very different, not with a commercial purpose. So the work abides to another rationale than the criteria relevant for commercial crop production. We do our work for cultural reasons, for historical reasons, for social reasons, for environmental reasons. All these reasons push us forward, despite all the problems to do our work. And what I think is very important to see is that for us, the varieties, the populations, all of that have an intrinsic value as such. So what does it mean in the end? No more overregulation of conservation work. We need an exemption not only for exchanges between members of seed conservation networks as suggested, as on the table in one of the options, because a lot of conservation work doesn't happen in formal networks, because a non-for-profit criteria is not suitable, because the exchange between members is insufficient, because as I told in the beginning, the aim is not just to preserve it and exchange between us. The diversity needs to be allowed to go back to the gardens, to the fields, and to the plates. We cannot just keep on changing it amongst each other. What is important for this future legislation is that the conservation work, to put the conservation work outside the scope, is looking at the aim with which plant material is passed on. So all activities of seed conservation networks, including seed savers, hobby gardeners, and farmers, should be out of the scope. Yes, that's a good start. But what we really need is that all activities aiming at the maintenance of plant genetic resources or the adaptation of plant genetic resources to regional agroecological conditions are outside the scope of the legislation. And that means that sales and exchanges of plant genetic resources and also varieties for those aims should be outside the scope and no longer banned or marginalized by the seed marketing legislation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Magdalena. I won't comment on this. I have to save time, and I immediately hand over to Blanche Margarine-Osrey. I think most of you know her. She has been involved on many levels of legislation in this field. So yours the floor, Blanche.
May I have a little tool?
Yeah, okay. Here you go.
Thank you, Hannes. Good afternoon to everybody. Yes, I have been asked to talk more specifically about the marketing of seeds to non-professionals. So, Yes, I will tell you about the actual state of the legislation based on what stands in the horizontal legislation, but also the environment drawn by conservation, so-called amateur varieties. I will also talk about what applies in France and in Denmark more specifically, and I will talk about the future and what is expected in the future legislation. Yes. So what does the actual horizontal legislation say about seeds for non-professionals? Well, actually not much, but the scope of the legislation draws some answer already. Indeed, the legislation is only applicable to the production with a view to marketing and to the marketing of seed. What does marketing mean then? Marketing means any transfer of reproductive material aimed at commercial exploitation of the seed. And more precisely, even European directives expressly state that trade in seed not aimed at commercial exploitation of the variety shall not be regarded as marketing. Two examples are given here where the recipient of the seed and not the supplier does not intend to make a commercial exploitation of the variety. And these examples are only a few examples. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. It's a bit slow.
It's a bit slow
It's a
in
bit slow.
taking your signal, so I think we have to be patient there. And I don't really know whether we have to point at the...
No, it's maybe here or whatever.
So you want back? You want to go back?
No,
No.
not at all. It goes back without me pushing for it. Yeah, okay. So next slide, please. So in conclusion, the intention of the recipient of the seed and not that of the supplier determines the nature of the transaction in the actual legislation. So any transfer of seeds to a third party who is not aiming a commercial exploitation of the variety stands out of the scope of the legislation, if you read the legislation literally. Next, please. So now, what about conservation varieties and so-called amateur varieties? I have to mention these two categories because they were designed in a way to fit the needs of non-professionals and also to bring an answer to the loss of agrobiodiversity as it is denounced by the international community and by many actors on the ground. These two categories result from two directives. Next, please. Adopted in 2008 and 2009. Next, please. Unfortunately, next. Yes. Unfortunately, for a number of reasons, they didn't lead to many registration. As you can see here, an average of only 21 conservation varieties and only 20 amateur varieties is registered in the member states. Next. In fact, only a few member states show a relatively significant number of registrations. Many member states don't show any registration at all. Next, please. Yes, you can see that here. Next. And when we compare these registrations with those of conventional varieties, the proportion is dramatically low, if not inexistent at all. Next. Same observation here concerning conservation varieties. Next. Yes. Proportion is very low again concerning conservation varieties. Next. So now, what is the applicable regime in France? It's interesting to mention because we had a lot of legislative activity ongoing concerning that topic. So, yes, 6 years of intensive legislative activity were necessary to lead to a significant relaxation of the rules in France. This was done in 3 phases. In phase 1, the Loi pour la reconquête de la biodiversité, or Biodiversity Act, if you will, which was adopted in August 2016, allowed for the free transfer of seeds to non-professionals with no registration of varieties and no certification. Yes, it's Article 11 of that law. If, next, if the transaction is free of any charge, and you can see here that a bit of the first phrase was erased because the commercial reach of the text was censored, unfortunately, by the Constitutional Court. Next, please. Yes, so the transaction needs to be free of any charge. Next. If the varieties in question belong to the public domain, they're not protected by intellectual property rights. Next. Recipients of the varieties are non-professional final users not aiming a commercial exploitation of the variety. Next. Sorry, next. Yes. And the sanitary rule still apply. Under these conditions, transfer of seeds do not imply registration of the varieties and certification of seed lots. Next. In phase 2, the French legislator tried to restore the commercial reach of the text through this piece of legislation, which was called Loi Egalim. Next. The law was successfully voted, but then censored again by the Constitutional Court for reasons I don't have time to expose here. In phase 3, yes, thank you. French deputies adopted a legal proposal coming from themselves and not from the government, and the text entered into force despite an adverse opinion of the European Commission next on the 12th of June of 2020. Yes, it brings the same relaxation of rules, but this time for onerous transaction. Next. Next. Yes. In conclusion, next. Yes, next. In conclusion, transfers of seeds intended to non-professional nowadays in France are not submitted to registration in the catalogue, are not submitted to certification of seed lots, and shall comply with the sanitary rules, which also provide for interesting derogations when direct sale to final users is at stake. What about Denmark now? Well, in Denmark, next, the same as in France is true since the publication of the circular in 2015. As you can see here, next, the sale and exchange of seed to private individuals are not covered by the rules. Next. A presentation of this regime was done by the Danish government, next, to the European Commission in May 2016, and as you can see, it's pretty clear. What then about the future? Yes, thank you. The Farm to Fork strategy provides expressly, next. Yes, next again. Yeah, and next. Voila. That the Commission will take measures to ensure easier market access for traditional and locally adapted varieties. Next, the biodiversity strategy goes in the same direction. Next. So what does that mean? What seems proportionate? Well, the simplest and also the most proportionate solution would be to keep transfers of seeds to non-professional out of the scope of the legislation, provided that non-professional don't need uniformity, stability, or value for cultivation and use. Their criteria for choice differ greatly from the objectives pursued by the legislation. They seek more diversity, rareness, fanciness, taste, colors, aesthetics, etc. Adaptation also to local regions. Provided also that sanitary rules are independent and apply anyway. Next, sorry. Yes, there is a last point. And we have to remind everyone that general consumer legislation is also independent and still applies and is enough to guarantee marketable quality, including rules on labeling and packaging of products. Thank you very much.
Dear speakers, I really feel bad about chasing you through this session. I'm trying to be fit for 45. This was fit 45 minutes with a wide range of things, but I think we have an idea of the scope and the limited scope and the opening of legislation, at least the opportunity that is there, and the challenges that lies in making something good out of it. I close this session. We will now change the panel, and I invite Martin to come up and moderate for the next session. I wish you all the best to be fit for 45. I would say try it 40, because then the deputies who allowed us to be in the parliament are interested to learn, but also then they will have their session. And then final, as I said, the final panel is after that. So I wish you good luck, fit for 40, I would say. We change now the panel here, and thanks to everybody who has contributed, and again, my excuse to chase you through this session. It's always a pity with so much competence. So, just to help you, Martin, we have Barbara Maria Rudolph already coming. We have Gretje Raphorst, Riccardo Bocci, where is he? He's coming, and François Meyenberg for the next session. I apologize, we have no question and answer time, but we will have it a bit later, I suppose. Okay. Martin. I'll be back after that. So I leave my, if you allow me, just take this. I'll have as much as you do.
Okay, so if you can please take your seats slowly. I will have the pleasure to continue, and our session will be the sandwich session between the opening and then the MEPs coming. But as in a sandwich, often the good part is in the middle, so that's also our goal for this session today. And I'm Martin Sommer. I'm working with IFOAM Organics Europe, the umbrella organization for organic food and farming. And I have the pleasure to have here 4 panelists who are really coming out of the practitioners field and who are working with getting varieties that we need on the market. And before we talked a lot about what is inside and outside of scope, and activities of those practitioners here are really inside of the scope. That's the only way to get varieties marketed also for farmers. I want to give a very short global context in which we are operating. So what types of varieties and populations do we need? So we do have the goal to expand organic land and also to reduce inputs. And for this, we do not only need those mandatory organic seeds, but also more varieties that are adapted to the organic conditions, which ultimately yield benefits for soil health, for water quality, and for biodiversity. But beyond the organic farmers, also conventional farmers and non-certified small peasants farmers are interested in varieties that are adapted to local and climate conditions. And especially since we want to reduce pesticides and synthetic fertilizers in Europe, this is our path forward for the next years. So we need the varieties that are fit for organic and fit for low input. Now, we've already seen a lot of progress with the organic regulation, new possibilities for organic farmers. But now that we move on into the seed rules review, what is at stake? And here we see that organic varieties has been established as a category. But are there going to be adaptations to actually facilitate the marketing and reflect the needs of organic farming? And beyond that, what are the expectations of seed conservationists and those that actually manage locally adapted land races? What are their expectations toward the legislation? And also, what can we do to regulate these activities that are highly relevant to manage our agrobiodiversity on the field? And how can we regulate this in a balanced manner that stimulates these activities and does not burden them with an overwhelming amount of regulatory and administratory tasks. And with this, I would like to go over to our panelists. And first of all, we start with Barbara Maria Rudolph, who is here today on behalf of Saatgut e.V. from Germany. And she's a former breeder speaking on behalf of EcoPB, the European Consortium of Organic Plant Breeders. And she's also a member of the EFORM Organics Europe Seed Expert Group. Barbara, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'll jump right in. While the use of organically propagated seed has already been mandatory since 2004, the EU organic regulation only now addresses the breeding process. For more than 25 years, organic plant breeders in Europe have already been developing, testing, and defining organic plant breeding under private law. Next slide, please. So organic plant breeding for us means organic cultivars are obtained by an organic plant breeding program as defined by I4M international norms of 2014 in lack of other legal references. All breeding steps from crossing till final selections take place under organic conditions, and the applied breeding techniques are in accordance with the techniques listed in the annex of the position paper of I4M International for organic breeding from November 2017. Moreover, cultivars derived from organic plant breeding shall not be patented. Again, this is what the sector has come up with as a definition for organic breeding. Next, please. Why do we need adjusted variety release for organic varieties? Organic breeding initiatives are aiming to develop a broad portfolio of crops and many cultivars within crops. So even with increasing market shares of organic breeding activities for such broad portfolio cannot be refinanced via royalties or seed sale. Based on Live Seed Farmer Survey, Most organic farmers claim that the lack of organic seed of locally adapted cultivars is the main bottleneck for organic production, and application of certain breeding techniques like genetic engineering or cell fusion are not accepted by organic farmers and consumers and limit the choice of farmers and gardeners. Especially critical is cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, and chicorée, may I say again. So there's a high demand for organic varieties suitable for organic agriculture and production. This is EcoPB is breeding for the professional sector, not for the unofficial sector. Organic breeders cannot invest too many resources to fulfill thresholds that are not relevant for farmers, processors, or consumers because of tight financial budgets and because there's only so few of us. Registration fees often are a bottleneck for small organic breeding initiatives. Next, please. So what does the organic regulation say about organic varieties? It says to foster research and to develop organic varieties suitable for organic production. A temporary experiment should be organized for a term of 7 years that should help to establish the criteria for the description and marketing conditions of that material. Next slide, please. Organic varieties suitable for organic production. That means a variety as defined, that is the seed laws. And then an organic variety is characterized by a high level of genetic and phenotypical diversity between individual reproductive units, which is frankly a contradiction to the first phrase. And we suggest that that is possible but should not be mandatory, the second phrase. And organic varieties result from organic breeding activities. Organic breeding activity, next slide please, according to the regulation, is for the production of organic varieties suitable for organic production. The organic breeding activities shall be conducted under organic conditions, and it shall focus on enhancement of genetic diversity, reliance on natural reproductive abilities as well as agronomic performance, disease resistance, and adaptation to diverse local soil and climate conditions. All multiplication practices except meristem culture shall be carried out under certified organic management. Next, please. That is, in a nutshell, what the organic regulation says for organic varieties and breeding. So looking at the seed marketing laws, the organic regulation introduces 2 new types of cultivars, the organic heterogeneous material and the organic variety suitable for organic production with adjusted DUS. I'm speaking for vegetable, not for arable crops. Next slide, please. So organic variety results from organic breeding activities. In order to achieve the label of organic variety, the whole breeding process has to take place under organic conditions. So if you start a conventional breeding program, you cannot turn that breeding material into organic variety, even if you place it in an organic field for selection or under organic VCU for arable crops. It still remains a conventional variety. We are emphasizing this because conventional breeding is increasingly accepting and using techniques that are inconsistent and incompatible with organic farming, with our principles, our basic approach and the customer expectations. Next slide, please. So adjusted DUS protocols should provide proper implementation of DUS for organic varieties, open pollinated, not FR1 hybrids. And it should provide an appropriate reference frame that makes sure open pollinated varieties are only compared with open pollinated varieties, which in theory is already thus, but in practice not. Then you can have the slides later. It's no problem. Adjusted DUS protocol should restrict the uniformity levels to a minimum required for product quality and use to allow higher adaptation and yield stability, to be able to work with that, it should assess all parameters for description, but use less parameters to judge. So restrict the mandatory traits to where uniformity is required by farmers, processors, and consumers. I put in the link to the Live Seed project. There is information about that in depth. Next slide, please. So what adjusted DUS, I don't have the time, unfortunately, to explain this sheet to you. This we already developed a proposal in 2020 for carrots and kohlrabi, which was only a proposal to work with. In a nutshell, you can see in the lower left side there was 31 mandatory traits before or now, and then we had an evaluation amongst farmers, producers, traders, processors, consumers, and breeders. And we came up with a proposal of 20 mandatory traits and 11 descriptive traits. This, of course, has to be, next slide, please, discussed with the examination offices. It's very clear that that can't be a one-sided process. We already started it with Nactembo in 2020 and with Geves in 2021. And right now, in lack of other activities, I'd say for 2022, the organic breeders have sent their candidates for variety application under the old regime and pre-testing to the Geves and the Nactembo, and those two examination bodies are willing to discuss the new possibilities and use those registration trials as a makeshift field for our discussion. We're very happy about that. So EcoPB is presently developing crop-specific suggestions for adjusted DUS, similar to the carrot and kohlrabi example for broccoli, onion, sunflower, barley, maize, tomato, and potato. To go forward with the 7-year experiment, we asked that common field trials should be set up for achieving agreement on adjusted DUS and testing, involving the examination offices, the breeders, and the researchers. And we need additional funding for that. And also the EU should inform their member states to participate in the temporary experiment and to provide respective funding. Maybe you could push for that a little bit more. Genau. So next slide, please. This is my last. For the seed revision, we asked that the adjusted DUS protocol for organic variety, open pollinated variety, should be implemented as we develop it in the 7-year experiment. Conservation varieties, amateur varieties, and organic heterogeneous material without DUS testing are very important for the organic sector and should be integrated in the seed directives, maybe as diversity cultivars. More flexible and market-oriented regulations should be implemented. The amateur market should be excluded from the scope, and we asked for the right to farm safe seed, that it should be established. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Barbara. And just to highlight once again more about what has been stressed here, that these VCU and US criteria, that I'm not sure if everyone has heard of them before, but these are really the criteria that you need to stick to in order to get a variety onto the market. So it's really like, you could say it's a bottleneck, it's a minimum criteria, but these are really crucial. And as we have heard from Barbara, there should be more flexibility depending on the farming context in which those varieties are used. And with this, we go over to our next practitioner, which is Hearty Raphorst. She's working with Nordic maize breeding in the Netherlands. And she's a co-owner of the Nordic maize breeding that has been founded in 2005, and you're focusing on, as the name suggests, maize production. The floor is yours, Hearty.
Yes, thank you, Martin, for this small introduction. I will go on a little bit more about introducing ourselves. Next, please. We are a small independent maize breeding company, but we have also a program in winter hardy peas and some other small crops. And we are specialized in ultra-early maize for silage, and our maize is silage mature within 18 weeks. What we advise is to grow crops before, after, and with maize. We are organic breeders, so we only look at the outside of the plants. And we lost our first variety on GMO contamination in 2013. And not mentioned, but also we tried to apply for a population about 15 years ago, and that was rejected even after two years. We also produce organic maize seed in the Netherlands, and that's also in the north of the Netherlands. Next, please. We produce organic seed together with farmers. As I always say, I can do nothing alone, so I work together with farmers. It's a beautiful job. Next, please. Yeah, and these are the locations where we produce seed. Even up to the Waddenzee in the Netherlands. And why do I show that? It's just to show that how early our maize varieties are and what kind of possibilities those give. You can even grow grain seed up to the north of the Netherlands. Next, please. And how do we grow maize? The first picture is our seed production the day before the harvest, and we always harvest before the 1st of October. Actually, the 2nd of October, because that's my birthday, and I don't want my seed on the field anymore when I'm having my birthday. And we grow maize with under-sowing. In seed production, we usually use a cover crop of a clover mixture, which makes that the farmer can have the maize seed production as a resting crop in his plan. But we also, for enhancing biodiversity, we also like buckwheat and phacelia. Next, please. And what can you do with when you breed ultra-early maize? You have a lot of possibilities to grow before and after your maize crop. We also have some winter pea varieties, and we are also fond of winter rapeseed after maize, which need to be planted in the Netherlands the first half of September. Next, please. One of our partners, Roding, they adapted the concept of winter cereal and winter hardy peas, and they are their consumers are very happy with it. Well, the harvest figures show that. Yeah. Next, please. We, in the Netherlands, we have our own VCU segment. As you can see, our Flint and Ambient varieties are the only ones that are harvestable around 18 weeks. And of course, our new prototype hybrids, NB 18 and so on, are also able to be mature within 18 weeks. And we started the first ultra-early VCU trials were in 2014. And next, please. Well, what did we encounter in the registration of maize? We encountered that VCU and DAS are established for maximizing yield, which stimulates maximum of inputs. The testing is established for standard maize varieties, which results in more of the same late F1 varieties. The testing is established for monocropping systems, which stimulates the use of chemicals and also soil erosion. And it is established for homogeneous material, which stimulates the loss of resilience and biodiversity in maize. And next, please. And also reduces possibilities for maize varieties which increase crop rotations, varieties which increase the use of cover crops, low input maize varieties, innovative and sustainable maize varieties. It reduces the possibilities for the independency of farmers. It reduces possibilities for soil recovery, suitable varieties for different regions, regional grain maize production, and last but not least, regional maize seed production. My last slide. Well, thank you very much for your attention. And I always end, stop monocropping and sowing the seeds of love. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, very much. With you and Barbara, we've been talking about how to streamline the seed marketing rules with the organic regulation, how to make the two converge. And now we're going into the topic of conservation varieties and heterogeneous populations. And there we have a true expert on this subject, Riccardo Bocci from Rete Semirurali, who's been executive director of Rete Semirurali, the Italian farmers network who's dedicated to the diversification of food systems, and food systems start with these.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I will present a little bit our activities in Italy, and then something about conservation of varieties, heterogeneous material and population, with some ideas for the future. Please, next slide. Okay, our network called Rete Semirurali is the Italian seed network. We are working on 4 thematic areas. One is policies, of course. Another one is communities. Action research activities, mainly on organic heterogeneous materials and population, participatory plant breeding, and community seed banks. And all are related by our new established digital ecosystem called Diversitas, that it's a digital ecosystem putting together a database, an app for collecting data from the fields, and also a portal called SeedLink for organic variety trials, traceability of organic heterogeneous material, and then culinary breeding. It means research with citizens, involving citizens in our process of research. Next, please. we started thinking about our network some years ago. Then it took more than 6 years to establish the network. Our foundation 2007 by 7 organizations. Next, please. And then our work moved from the beginning to now, from conservation to community agrobiodiversity management. When we started working, our main word was conservation of agrobiodiversity. But then we started doing participatory plant breeding, and then we started using innovation for describing what we are doing. So now what we are calling our activities more community agrobiodiversity management than just conservation. What does mean community agrobiodiversity management? On-farm conservation, of course, but we have integrated community seed banks, new actors also in Europe, and we have integrated decentralized participatory research, informal seed systems, and farm-based local seed enterprise. All of them are activities under community biodiversity management framework. Next, please. Some of our practical outcomes related also to the derogation on population. Here you see the label of our first population market in Italy, some 5 years ago, by a farmer in yellow. So we did a celebration the day that we got the label from our officials in Italy in the farm together with the farmers. Next, please. And we also developed this label for our seeds, the first label in Italy based on open seed source pledge. You see we have a well-defined graphical identity. Next, please. Then we describe the name of the population, please. The next. Name of the farmers, where the seeds are produced. Next, please. Then we describe the history of the composite cross population, the breeding process, all the actors involved. Next, please. And then intellectual property rights. So we are saying that the seeds that the clients are buying are free of intellectual property rights, but there is a pledge, an open source pledge. Next, please. And they have to respect some social rules when they are opening the seed drop. Next, please. So, the system that we have set up in the past years. So, let's come to conservation varieties. Please, next. You can see here that through different European projects, we did more or less the same path, from conservation varieties to innovation, organic varieties and population. The first project we worked on was farm seed opportunities, and our activities was on conservation varieties. Then, thanks to Soliban, we started creating composite cross-population. Then, thanks to DiversiFood, we developed studies on population, how to manage population in the fields, how to describe, and so on. And then, thanks to Life Seed, we developed specific framework for organic heterogeneous material, organic seeds. As you see, the same path that we did in Italy within our organization. Next, please. And what we realized, thanks to the different European projects, and also part of our discussion today, is that the approach one size fits all is not more realistic. We have to change this approach. It was the approach that we used in seed policy for many years. Next, please. And if you look at the seed reform, the previous seed reform in the evaluation done by the Food Chain Evaluation Consortium, you can see in their report that 10 years ago, maybe more, they say that we can imagine to have 2 different systems. The larger commercial breeding companies, the smaller market or regional breeders, producers, run side by side, because they are targeting completely different markets. We didn't achieve this in the previous reform, but I think now it's time to achieve this. Please, next one. You know all this is, please, the next, okay. You know the situation in Europe, so no need for more explanation. Next, please. What is important is try to answer now to the question that was raised by Common Agricultural Policy, Farm-to-Farm Strategy, Biodiversity Strategy. So how to achieve the target of 25% of agriculture without addressing the issue of organic seeds. We need to address the issue, and we can do it 2 ways. Next, please. The first one, bringing back diversity to food system, as shown before by many of us. And the other point that is really relevant, breeding for marginal environments. We start to breed again for marginal environments, to breed for diversity. And that's crucial for a country like Italy, where we have a lot of marginal environments. And so we need to do research activities in the context where the seed will be used. Next, please. So why we need organic seeds and why we need to breed for marginal environments? It's clear from this picture. You see, if you are in the right part of the picture, you are in commercial agriculture, in the plain of the Po Valley in Italy, your modern varieties, they are producing much more than landraces or organic heterogeneous material with inputs, water and fertilizer and so on. But if you are on the left side of this figure, so in marginal environments, organic agriculture is the opposite that is true. So we have to think that we need to provide varieties to marginal environments because modern varieties, they don't fit for them. Next, please. So the question about widely or specifically adapted genotypes is something that science addressed some 30 years ago, thanks to Ceccarelli. The first paper was in 1994, and we are still fighting on that issue. So we need in organic agriculture locally adapted varieties and non-modern varieties bred for uniform environments. Next, please. So the approach to agrobiodiversity should move from conservation to community agrobiodiversity management. We have to see genetic resources not only as raw materials for breeding and then uniformity, but as a way to diversify our food system and our diets, and also, at the end, public health and nutrition. We are not talking only about seed marketing, but we are talking about public health in Europe, and that's an issue. Here you can see a new book by Biodiversity International, and biodiversity, food and nutrition are extremely linked together. So the seeds that we are cultivating and then we are eating, they are really relevant for public health. Please, next one. So, we are not only to address seed marketing, but in general agricultural policy, please. And so we have to consider ABS, IPR, seed laws, agricultural policy, research policy, seed policy, all together in a complementary manner in order to develop diversified seed system. Next one, please. So that's the picture that we developed thanks to DiversiFood project. Here you see our diversified seed system where you have at the same time what you used to call informal seed system and formal seed system, and you can see how different policy can block the gene flow or the seed flows in the system and also informal seed system. Please, next one. I'm almost at the end. Ideas for the future. Next. So we are working with diversity and populations. That's good for organic system, but that's good also for health, nutrition, and also it's important to have, again, evolutionary processes in place in agricultural system for breeding for the future. Next, almost at the end. So a new approach is needed. We have to work on seed system, consider at the same time market as a way to have dedicated legislation, but also to promote exchange, cultivation of diversity, on-farm research, and we call all of this sustainable use of PGRFA. Next one. So that's something from Farm Seed Opportunities. We developed this framework, I think, more 15 years ago. We are still talking about this framework. So the idea of having different systems, seed laws, research, breeding, market, IPRs, according to the different type of varieties that we have in place. So not only for conventional varieties, but a dedicated framework for farmers variety, population varieties, conservation varieties, and so on. And we are still some path to do in order to reach this. Next one. So, keywords of the new seed system will be decentralized, farmer-oriented seed system with a new role for farmer in breeding and innovation. So thanks to participatory plant breeding, just to give an example, in this way we are also implementing at the European level the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources, in particular Article 6 on sustainable use of PGRFA. Next, it's my last one. I would like also to remind you that we have a responsibility because the world is looking at Europe. In Africa, they are copying and paste our seed laws to do their seed laws. So we need to change our laws in order to give them the possibilities to do something different. At the moment, they are copying what we did in the 60s. That is not really adapted to them. So we have the responsibility to change in Europe and then let them to change also in their countries. Next, thank you. And if you would like to have more information, please.
Thank you, Riccardo, for this very fast and very rich presentation. And maybe one take-home message is also that conservationists clearly don't conserve for the museum, but actually they produce raw materials that can be used for further breeding. And with this, before we head over to the MEP statement, I would like to welcome François from Specie Rara, a seed saver organization in Switzerland. And he has a proposal. The Commission has or will come up with a proposal, but also François will come up with a proposal on seed diversity varieties. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. Blah. Yes, thank you very much. So, as it was already said, I'm coming from an organization called Pro Specie Rara. We have a branch in Switzerland and a branch in Germany. We have also a branch in the French part of Switzerland and the Italian part. We are not a big organization. We have about 30 employees, but we have about 4,000 seed savers. So a big network which are doing selection breeding, which selects and propagates and multiplicates the varieties we have in our collection. And as you see, we have about 5,000 varieties, 1,600 vegetables, ornamentals, then a lot of fruits and berries and so on, and also rare breeds. And as it was the case with Ricardo and Rete Semirurali, next please, the conservation was at the beginning, but now it's quite clear what we are doing. It's not conservation only, it's not a museum. We like to go on, we like to do sustainable use. And in this graph, you see that's about vegetables. So we have about 1,600 varieties in our collection, and then we do evaluation, and we are always testing what could be brought to the market, also to the supermarkets. And here we have a cooperation with the biggest supermarket in Switzerland, the Coop, and we do this evaluation together with the farmers to see what could go to the shelves of the supermarket. For the moment, we have about over 60 varieties which are sold, also not as seeds, but as vegetables, as cucumbers and salads and so on, in the supermarkets. For this, we have registered niche varieties. On the other hand, we have also seen in our evaluation that we have a lot of varieties which are maybe not interesting for the big supermarkets, but for the home gardeners. And so we have a cooperation with seed companies selling this agrobiodiversity to home gardeners and others. Next, please. So it has already been said today, I think what we are doing is not only to preserve genetic resources. I think the broad consensus here, we have to do it, but this has to go back to our fields. And if it goes back to our fields, it will also go back to our plates, and here we will also have a positive impact to our healthy diet. And it's clearly, if we now develop a new seed marketing legislation, this must support all these three goals. Next, please. Now, this is nothing new. Back in 20 years ago, when the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources have been adopted, the same goals were already there, and this has ratified by the European Union. This, I would say, is the global consensus, that we need these policy and legal measures to promote the sustainable use of this biodiversity. We need policies that promote the sustainable use and expand the use of local and locally adapted varieties. And to do so, and this is also anchored in Article 6 of the treaty, we should review our regulations concerning variety release and seed distribution. So here, I think it's a clear task. And when you read the strategies of the European Union, the biodiversity strategy, Farm to Fork, it's clear it is now incorporated in the strategies, and the next step is now to bring these into the seed market legislation. Thanks. Now, as we see it, we see three pillars. We will have, as it is today, the main pillar, and maybe it will not be the main pillar in the future. It will be one of three pillars. It will be the industrial conventional seed system with the US, with VCU. Together, we have the seed diversity system. There will be maybe no DUS, so if we see also the organic varieties, there will be adopted DUS and VCU. and we have this whole seed conservation network, including the management of the biodiversity. This includes also farmers' network, which should be out of scope. And for me, I think a crucial message I like to share with you is there is no concurrence here. It's not one against the other. All these pillars have a different task, and therefore all the three of them needs to be promoted, and all the three of them needs a legislation promoting their work. Thanks. Next. So I like to share some views about this middle pillar, what we call the diversity seed system. So for me, it's clear now we have these conservation varieties, we have amateur varieties. This is implemented, as we heard already, in various ways. And here it should be clear, this needs to be simplified. We need all species which are in the scope of the law. I think we need one system. There should be no DOS, what we call these diversity varieties, and notification should be enough. There should be no geographical or quantitative restrictions. Why should they be? And first of all, we have also to reduce bureaucracy, and with the reduction of bureaucracy also to reduce the cost. To do so, maybe the Swiss system we have today could be a source of inspiration. Next. In Switzerland today, we don't have what you call conservation varieties or what you call amateur varieties. We have what we call niche varieties. And niche varieties are all varieties that don't fulfill the official registration conditions. So this could be ecotypes, this could be heterogeneous varieties, this could be old land races. All of them could be registered easily as a niche variety. It's a very low registration fee, 50 Swiss francs, one forever. And they just have to be designated as authorized niche variety. Today we have about 80 niche varieties registered, about 40 vegetables, about 40 field crops. I think it's a quite easy system. Also Presbyterian has registered a lot of them. But also seed companies have registered these kind of niche varieties. Next. I'm already at the end. I think my last message, I think transparency is crucial. There should be no prohibition or no restriction at all to exchange and trade plant genetic resources. But every user, so every farmer, every gardener should just know what he has in front of it. He should know it's heterogeneous, it's organic bred, or it's a commercial variety. And the goal of the reform must be that the new legislation is tailored to the needs of all the different actors, because all actors are an integral part of the EU seed landscape, and we need them all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, François, and ending indeed on a very crucial point that the transparency for the users, is it farmers, is it amateurs, is it something in between, is very important. With this, I don't think we have time for question and answers. I would like to invite the MEPs to come onto the stage, and also our moderator for this day, Hannes, and we will continue in a moment.
wonderful. We've been trying to be fit for 45-minute sessions. You had to vote on fit for 55. You were not able, dear members of parliament, to follow the whole discussion, but I can tell you it was a very rich and very positive discussion so far. We will have after the session with you where we exchange. Is there a problem with the translation?
I don't need.
Yeah, but okay, good. Okay, so very welcome, dear members of parliament, at this very important meeting about the future legislation on seed marketing. And what we have already found out, it's not just the seed marketing, it's the whole question of bringing things together which need to be fit for the future. And that means we are also discussing seed marketing laws against the Green Deal ambitions, the farm to fork ambitions, and all the challenges agriculture and rural areas are facing. So it is a very broad discussion, in fact, even if we focus today on seed marketing legislation. And you will remember that the Parliament was at a certain point when the Commission made the first attempt to reform the seed legislation in 2013, there was across the board, across the different parties, a unique feeling that that was not enough. And it was rejected, and the Commission kind of said, "Oof, well, we have to rethink it." And apparently the Commission has rethought it and that's what we heard already this afternoon, that it needs to, the new legislation needs really to respond to all the other ambitions that the Commission has expressed on biodiversity strategy, farm to fork, and the Green Deal as such. So I put our discussion between MEPs, and I think it's statements, but it can also be discussion, into this context. Perhaps with the exception of Mrs. Hazekamp, everybody who sits here on the panel right now was in the negotiations on the organic regulation for 3 years. And when I look into the faces, they all still remember how difficult that was. That Jan Scholars was the one who kicked it off and who brought us into that situation as commissioner. But it was a very, very intensive exercise. And what came out of it was something that now opens the window and opens opportunities to the seed legislation in general. And that's the exciting point, I think, that we are looking from something that was perceived for a long time as the exception in agriculture to what is still seen as the rule, conventional farming. And there's where let's say, the diversity spreads out as a challenge to industrial farming or to, let's say, the conventional farming. So I would like to kick it off like this. Organic, more sustainable farming, climate-friendly farming is, the challenge everybody agrees, and the objective of bringing European farming in that direction. Organic is still defined in the Commission, at least. That's okay. Let's go to 25%, but maybe it's not just that question. Is it organic or not? The question is, where is the diversity in the whole system, and what is the seed legislation in that system, and what can we achieve through a seed marketing law, through more transparency, we've heard, more participative research, more cooperation, not just competition. So all these concepts come together in this question. So I hope I haven't talked too much, but I thought it was a kind of warming up from the decision of the discussion of this afternoon, or at least we didn't really have a discussion yet. But of the contributions of this afternoon. And I would like to invite perhaps from my far left to the far right to mix it up a little. So I would like to ask you, Norbert, from your experience, from your role as president of the Agriculture Committee, from your knowledge about seed legislation, what would you like to focus on when it comes to this new project of reforming the European seed legislation on seed marketing? Yours the floor, Norbert.
Yes, thank you very much for this. I will switch into my mother tongue to be more precise on that, so maybe when you need time. Ja, ich glaube, dann kann ich mal loslegen. Vielen herzlichen Dank, dass ich als Erster das Wort bekomme. Das ist nett, auch in der Tat, dass ich ganz links außen sitze, ist sehr ungewöhnlich für mich, aber ich glaube, wir werden klarkommen. Auch Anja, die jetzt sozusagen die andere extreme Rolle hier auf dem Podium einnehmen wird. Nein, ich wollte zunächst mal sagen, kann das natürlich bestätigen, dass wir ja schon einen längeren Weg haben, und es ist gut, dass auch der Moderator schon erklärt hat, nicht immer, es geht nicht nur um Biolandwirtschaft und Saatgut für die Biolandwirtschaft, sondern es geht auch um mehr, und ich habe sehr interessiert den Vortrag auch von Herrn Meyenberg verfolgt. Er hat ja sozusagen das Schweizer Modell gepreist. Dafür gibt es, glaube ich, Gründe. Ich würde generell sagen, immer wenn was aus der Schweiz kommt, bin ich skeptischer. Ich wohne sehr nah an der Schweiz und würde sagen, wenn wir das Schweizer System in die Europäische Union integriert hätten, dann wären wir nirgendwo. Also mit den Prozessen, mit den Abstimmungsprozessen, also ich bin nicht beim Saatgut, nicht, dass Sie mich falsch verstehen, sondern mit den demokratischen Prozessen, die so in der Schweiz praktiziert werden, die wären sicherlich für eine Europäische Union mit 27 Mitgliedstaaten nicht ganz so erfolgreich insgesamt, wie wir es in den letzten Jahrzehnten geschafft haben. Ich will aber gar nicht abschweifen vom Thema, sondern glaube in der Tat, dass Sie ganz interessante Vorschläge gemacht haben, wie die Saatgutverordnung aussehen könnte. Und man hat ja eben gesehen oder hat einen Vorgeschmack bekommen, Martin Häusling und Erik André im Zuge der Bio-Verordnung, wo ich schon glaube, dass wir da bei diesen Themen auch eng das Parlamentsmandat verteidigt haben und eben auch gerade beim Saatgut, heterogenes Material etc. schon sehr nachdrücklich in den Verhandlungen darauf bedacht waren, dass da in der Gesetzgebung der Öko-Verordnung auch was drinsteht. Und ich will auch sagen, manchmal was wir uns an Ambitionen auch vorgenommen hat, wird man manchmal auch ein bisschen von der Realität denn eingeholt. Als wir jetzt die Bio-Verordnung in Kraft gesetzt haben, kurz davor hatten wir auch nochmal, Martin, Gespräche mit der Europäischen Kommission, wo wir dann zum Beispiel gesagt haben, bei den Jungpflanzen für den Obstanbau, da müssen wir, glaube ich, doch stärker verlängern, ja, was sozusagen das Nutzen oder Weiternutzen auch von konventionellen Pflanzen betrifft. Also das eine ist die Ambition, aber das andere ist natürlich, wenn du dann merkst, wenn du eine Verordnung in Kraft setzt und du würdest eigentlich dem Sektor schaden, jetzt in dem konkreten Fall, dem Öko-Obstbau, dann gilt es dann auch pragmatisch zu handeln aus meiner Sicht, und da haben wir dann entsprechend, glaube ich, auch zu Recht nochmal eine Verlängerung dann der Kommission erhalten. Also ich will damit sagen, dass dies ein langfristiges Projekt ist und dass man da natürlich auch dran arbeiten muss und immer auch schauen muss, und das hat Herr Meyenberg ja auch richtigerweise gesagt. Wir wollen ja nicht fürs Museum arbeiten, sondern wir wollen es ja aufs Feld bringen. Es soll sozusagen ja auch dann Lebensmittelproduktion bedeuten und gleichzeitig auch die Biodiversität stärken. Ich glaube, das muss unser Ziel sein. Vielleicht zwei Aspekte, Hannes, wenn ich darauf eingehen darf, wenn ich so mal die alte Saatgutverordnung mir anschaue, und das ist auch teilweise in den Vorträgen, glaube ich, schon vorgekommen, auch wenn ich nicht allen folgen konnte. Da gab es einen Artikel 57 mit amtlich anerkannten Beschreibungen, auch Registrierungsnotwendigkeiten Und die gilt nur für Sorten, die bereits vor Inkrafttreten der Verordnung auf dem Markt waren, also die historische Beschränkung. Und ich glaube, es ist uns allen klar, dass es Pflanzentypen gibt, die nur lokal genutzt wurden und nie auf dem Markt erhältlich waren. Und da stellt sich eben die Frage, wie sollen solche Ursprungsregionen dann definiert werden, wenn wir wissen, dass zum Beispiel Weizen, Apfel oder Tomaten nicht wirklich ursprünglich aus Europa waren. Ja? Und dann ist, glaube ich, fällt so eine Definition schwierig oder eine so geografische Beschränkung ist, glaube ich, schwierig, die dann ins Werk zu setzen. Deswegen könnte schon eine Lösung sein, die Streichung der historischen und geografischen Beschränkungen im Endeffekt, dass eine vereinfachte Registrierung wieder geöffnet werden würde für alle offen bestäubenden Pflanzen, die eben nicht durch Patente geschützt sind. Das könnte gegebenenfalls da eine Lösung sein. Oder das Thema Nischenmärkte ist vorher auch schon mal kurz angesprochen worden. Auch da, glaube ich, brauchen wir einfach dann eine Ausnahmeregelung und da könnte ja so eine Kleinlandwirte-Regelung vielleicht die Lösung sein, dass wir die aus dem Anwendungsbereich ausnehmen würden. Einfach vielleicht mal 2 Ideen, wie man mit vielleicht der ursprünglichen Saatgutverordnung oder wenn diese Ideen so bestehen bleiben würden. Idealerweise wäre es natürlich gut, wenn die Kommission das schon aufnehmen würde, aber eben das könnten Lösungsmöglichkeiten sein für 2 der doch oft diskutierten Probleme. Vielen Dank.
Vielen Dank, Norbert. I switch to English. That was the first proposal. I think what we will, of course, see is, as usual, an amending procedure in the Parliament. And as there was already an impact assessment and we have some kind of experience as Parliament, I'm saying we, the Parliament has kind of experience of how to deal with the preparatory phase of such a legislative proposal. I think it's good that there is a lot of proposals, as we've seen today, on details. People are really competent authorities, I said that at the beginning, of their experience in selection, in cooperation and so on. Which should be taken into account when the procedure from a proposal to the amending procedure in the Parliament takes place. And Darshan, you have a long experience from both sides. You have looked at the Parliament from Commission side, and you see now as a Member of Parliament how important that process of a negotiation is. I don't know what your feeling about this new legislation is and how you put that into context of the broader ambitions we all together seem to carry to deal with climate change and with the loss of biodiversity across the Union. Yours the floor.
Merci, Hannes. Je vais parler de la diversité, donc je commence avec la diversité linguistique. En fait, ce qu'on a actuellement en vigueur, la législation qui est en vigueur maintenant, qui date des années 60-80, il me semble, c'était une législation adaptée aux défis de l'agriculture au moment respectif, où on devrait stimuler la création de nouvelles variétés, des hybrides, avec des objectifs qu'on avait à l'époque, notamment la productivité et aussi l'adaptation à certaines conditions spécifiques. Mais en même temps, on voulait aussi stimuler les compagnies qui produisaient des semences, qui doivent investir, qui doivent faire des recherches, qui doivent faire la sélection variétale, qui est coûteuse. Donc, on a mis en place une législation qui est assez restrictive sur la mise sur le marché et qui donne des avantages à des compagnies qui se spécialisent sur cette activité. Le problème, c'est qu'on est arrivé à une concentration de la capacité de production de semences Et même si on a une liste longue de variétés et d'hybrides qui ont été créés, on est quand même allé vers un processus d'uniformisation variétale, parce que c'est à peu près la même base génétique qu'on combine de différentes manières pour créer de soi-disant nouvelles variétés et hybrides. Et donc aujourd'hui, moi je partirais de quels sont les enjeux actuels de l'agriculture actuelle et à quels enjeux la production de semences doit répondre. Et donc là, on a l'enjeu du climat, de l'environnement et de la diversité écologique. On se rend compte de plus en plus qu'on l'a perdu et que c'est mauvais de l'avoir perdu et que donc on doit la récupérer. On a aussi le problème de maladies. Certaines maladies ont proliféré pour de différentes raisons et les variétés actuelles ont du mal à trouver la résistance. On a utilisé pas mal de produits de traitement, de produits chimiques, et maintenant on se pose la question de comment réduire leur utilisation parce qu'elles ont des effets secondaires négatifs. Mais on voit aussi la demande sur le marché. Les goûts des consommateurs est plus divers, même si les consommateurs regardent toujours le prix, mais ils regardent de plus en plus la diversité. Et on a aussi une demande locale qui commence à se structurer. Donc, si on regarde ces défis, pour beaucoup de ces défis, on a des solutions dans le choix variétal. On a les technologies aussi qu'on utilise, mais le choix variétal. Donc, moi, je partirais de là, de toute cette liste de défis. Et il faudrait trouver une manière pour, d'un côté, continuer à soutenir la recherche et la création de nouvelles variétés, mais en même temps créer la capacité de reconnaître, de ne pas mettre en illégalité des variétés anciennes qui se cultivent, mais qu'on ne peut pas échanger. Parce qu'on est arrivé dans une situation ridicule où on a eu pendant un certain temps l'échange des semences était presque en illégalité, en fait, du point de vue législatif. Donc, je pense que on doit trouver des solutions pour que des variétés qui sont déjà bien fixées, et ça, on n'a pas besoin de faire beaucoup d'études, d'analyses pour les identifier, qu'on puisse les enregistrer sans des coûts trop élevés et ne plus être dans la logique de grandes compagnies productrices de semences qui peuvent se permettre de payer des coûts assez élevés pour le test et l'enregistrement de ces variétés. Et pensez aussi à un système de production de semences qui est adapté à la fois aux exploitations commerciales, des grandes exploitations, mais aussi aux petites exploitations. Le système qu'on a actuellement n'est pas adapté aux petites exploitations et on limite beaucoup la capacité de reproduction de matériel séminal dans l'exploitation. Et donc, cette limitation, je pense que ça crée des problèmes à la fois du point de vue coût pour les producteurs, coût de production, mais aussi la capacité d'adapter, de reproduire des variétés locales qui sont adaptées localement et qui ne peuvent pas rentrer actuellement dans les systèmes de commercialisation, même si elles se commercialisent localement, parce qu'on a un système qui pense à l'uniformité globale et qui ne prend pas en compte aussi la diversité locale. Hannes le disait, on a une expérience avec le système de production de semences pour l'agriculture écologique. Je pense que c'est bien d'avoir cette référence. Là, il s'agit d'autre chose, d'un marché plus important, mais cette référence, je pense que peut être utilisée. Et donc, pour moi, la solution qu'on devrait trouver à la fin de toutes ces discussions devrait nous permettre, comme je disais, de maintenir le système de recherche et de production variétale, mais en même temps celui de protection et de multiplication de variétés locales et ne plus faire la conservation dans des musées ou juste dans des banques de ressources génétiques, mais la faire sur le terrain et donner la possibilité aussi aux consommateurs de choisir. Voilà, je ne vais pas être plus long, mais je peux répondre à des questions si vous voulez.
Merci Dacian. Je donne tout de suite la parole à Martin Häusling. He was rapporteur for the Parliament on the organic regulation, which finally came into force 1st of January 2022. I think the whole process took 8-9 years. All your fault, Dacian. You kicked it off. Martin, yours the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I talk in German, so we need translation. Man muss auch die deutschen Dolmetscher mal entlasten. Ja, ich finde, wir haben heute, werden vielleicht das spätere Generation merken, heute einen richtig historischen Tag. Wir haben im Parlament jetzt für 55 verabschiedet, zwar nicht ganz so, wie es alle Fraktionen wollten, aber ich glaube, wir haben einen guten Kompromiss erzielt. Und wir haben heute wichtige Maßnahmen der Kommission, Pestizidreduktion, Naturrestore-Gesetzgebung auf den Weg gebracht. Und das sind Meilensteine, glaube ich, über die man später mal sagen wird, da hat die Europäische Union Maßstäbe gesetzt. Wir als Parlament haben auch schon mal Maßstäbe gesetzt in 2013, als wir tatsächlich den Kommissionsvorschlag damals zurückgewiesen haben. Auch das hat es vorher meines Wissens so in der Form noch nicht gegeben, dass das Parlament einfach einen Vorschlag der Kommission ohne Aussprache, also ohne Behandlung im Parlament zurückgeschickt hat, nach dem Motto, bessere Vorlage machen. Was waren damals die Hauptkritikpunkte? Ich glaube, das haben ja einige schon gesagt. Es war sehr stark ausgerichtet auf die Saatgutindustrie. Die hat ja auch nicht nur einen kleinen Lobbyverband, sondern einen sehr großen Lobbyverband. Die haben damals also geklatscht, als die Kommission die Vorlage gemacht hat, weil genau das, was hier einige kritisiert haben, strenge DUS-Kriterien, Uniformität in den Vordergrund gestellt, der internationale Markt in den Vordergrund gestellt und das, was viele Bauern als ihr Privileg zum Beispiel verstehen und das sie auch haben, eigenes Saatgut auch weiter zu vermarkten, eigenes Saatgut auch weiter zu entwickeln, ist unter den Tisch gefallen. Also Farmers Privilege war kein Thema, sondern es wurde so getan, als wäre es gefährlich sozusagen auch heterogenes Material einzubringen, weil das wäre nicht geprüft und da könnten ja Krankheiten mit einhergehen. Und viele haben damals gesagt, nee, es reicht ja nicht, wenn wir ein großes Lager in Spitzbergen haben, wo wir die ganzen verschiedenen Sorten jetzt aufheben. Wir müssen die auch, und das hat ja vorhin ein Schweizer Kollege auch gesagt, auf den Markt bringen. Wir müssen sie auch weiterentwickeln können. Und es nützt uns nichts, wenn sie in Spitzbergen in einem mittlerweile auch auftauenden Saatgutbunker liegen, wenn sie da liegen, sondern wir müssen diese Sorten weiterentwickeln. Ich selber bin ja Landwirt, jetzt ja nur noch Wochenendlandwirt, aber wenn ich mir das, was ich in der Landwirtschaftsschule gelernt habe, war sozusagen, der Ertrag ist das Maximum. Der Ertrag ist das Wichtigste und danach hast du eine Sorte auszusuchen. Und dann steht an den Saatgutbüchern immer an irgendeinem bestimmten Punkt, ja, die Sorte bekommt irgendwann eine bestimmte Krankheit. Also bei Weizen zum Beispiel sind die Pilzkrankheiten, die kommen dann bei Hochertragssorten in irgendeinem Stadium. Und dann steht dahinter, dann musst du folgendes Spritzmittel einsetzen, folgendes Pestizid hilft dagegen. Wir haben alle irgendwie gedacht, immer auch so, wie wir das gelernt haben, Pestizide sind dann die Lösung. Wir haben zwar anfällige Sorten, aber irgendwann setzt man dann die Pestizide dazu ein und dann kriegen wir das in den Griff. Und so hat die Saatgutregulierung und die Chemieindustrie sozusagen auch zusammengearbeitet. Und man muss sich mal anschauen heute, wie die großen Saatgutkonzerne sind Chemiefirmen. Das sind Chemiefirmen. Also Monsanto und Bayer und BASF, wie sie alle heißen, sind ja Chemiefirmen, die haben sich den Saatgutmarkt angeeignet. Warum wohl? Weil sie genau wissen, Material, was anfällig ist, wird auch am Ende dazu führen, dass Bauern Chemie nutzen. Und ich glaube, das müssen wir jetzt umdrehen. Wir müssen Sorten auswählen, die angepasst sind an die sich verändernde Klimasituation, regionale Sorten auf den Markt bringen, heterogenes Material nicht sozusagen in die Nische stellen, kann ja sein, aber ich finde, sie gehören auch auf den Markt. Und ich glaube, in der Organic Regulation haben wir Maßstäbe gesetzt Und warum es so lange gedauert hat, dass der dreijährige Verhandlungsprozess so lange gedauert hat mit der Kommission, hat auch was mit der Saatgutregulierung zu tun gehabt, weil genau an dem Punkt wollte die Kommission nicht mitziehen. Und wir haben es ja dann über Fraktionsgrenzen hinweg geschafft, das doch durchzubekommen, weil gerade auch für den Ökosektor diese regional angepassten Sorten etwas extrem Wichtiges sind und dass wir da nicht einen Markt schließen müssen, sondern ihn aufmachen müssen und dass wir für heterogenes Material jetzt keine Prüfung mehr brauchen, sondern es muss nur registriert werden. Und dann auch die Weiterentwicklung hin zu Sorten, die den Anspruch haben, biologische Sorten zu haben. Das sind, glaube ich, Meilensteine gewesen, die wir gemeinsam vorangebracht haben. Ich will nicht zu lange reden, aber ich finde, was wir jetzt, ich hoffe, die Kommission hat aus dem vorherigen Zurückweisung gelernt. Ich habe jetzt leider, konnten wir das hier nicht hören. Aber ich hoffe, die Kommission hat diese Aspekte, die wir damals diskutiert haben, jetzt auch verinnerlicht und bringt eine Regulierung auf den Markt, die das alles berücksichtigt. Weil ein Punkt noch, ich war jetzt beim Vortrag von Leuten, die Obstbäume züchten. Und wenn Sie heute in den Supermarkt gehen und kaufen einen Apfel, die sehen ja alle ziemlich uniform aus. Ne? Ist ja also sogar in den Kriterien festgelegt, wie viel Rot und wie viel Weiß muss drin sein und so. Aber alle diese ganzen Sorten, die wir auf dem Markt haben, kommen im Wesentlichen aus 3 Stämmen, sagen 3 Sorten, die man miteinander kombiniert hat. Alle extrem krankheitsanfällig. Und so hat man einen Markt geschaffen, wo eigentlich gerade im Obstbau wahnsinnige Mengen an Chemie eingesetzt werden müssen und man gar nicht mehr die Varietät von, glaube ich, 800 Sorten, die wir auf dem europäischen Markt mal hatten, gar nicht mehr vorkommt, sondern sich das Ganze auf 3 Sorten konzentriert. Da müssen wir uns nicht wundern, warum Obstbauern ihre Plantagen 40 Mal spritzen müssen, um einen scheinbar gesunden Apfel zu produzieren. Da müssen wir von wegkommen und wir müssen diese Vielfalt wieder auf den Markt bringen und dürfen keinen Bauern und keinen kleinen Züchter behindern. Das wäre mein Statement. Danke.
Thank you very much, Martin. Eric, it's yours the floor. The only thing I would... Non, je vais faire en français alors. Excusez-moi. Pardon. Non, je veux mentionner que c'est tous les groupes politiques qui, ici au Parlement, ont invité la société civile, la Commission pour discuter. Donc, c'est un grand merci aux députés de nous et de tous les groupes politiques de faire cette réunion possible. Donc, je crois que c'est important de le mentionner maintenant. Eric, à toi.
Oui, et puis merci à toi, Hannes, d'avoir été le maître de cérémonie. On va dire comme ça. C'est important. Et merci à vous toutes et à vous tous d'être là, bien sûr. Je vais essayer de ne pas reprendre ce qui a été dit pour compléter les propos. À l'évidence, d'abord le contexte. On est dans un contexte, ça a été plus ou moins dit, bien particulier. Martine le disait, lors du débat sur le rapport bio, donc ça a été long. Je peux en témoigner, on est là pour en témoigner. Mais je n'ai pas ce envie de dire que la Commission a fait des grands pas depuis. C'est-à-dire que depuis lors, et c'est le contexte du moment, il y a eu le Green Deal, donc il y a eu Farm to Fork, il y a eu biodiversité. Et le débat sur les semences arrive dans ce moment-là. Et aujourd'hui, tu l'as dit, Martine, on vient de franchir une étape importante en matière climatique. Donc un texte va être voté, pas suffisamment ambitieux pour certains, mais trop pour d'autres. Mais en tous les cas, c'est toujours l'objet des compromis. Les choses avancent. Et j'ai presque envie de dire, un certain nombre de prises de conscience se font, même si, pour certains, et je fais partie de cela, j'aimerais bien que ça aille beaucoup plus vite, finalement, donc, parce que l'urgence est là. Et en matière de climat, donc on sait bien ce que ça veut dire. Et nous avions un débat ce matin avec Dacian, avec la FAO en particulier, où on avait une vision très large donc, de la réalité mondiale de l'alimentation. Et c'est vrai que chacun s'accorde à dire qu'effectivement, il faut accélérer tous les processus. Mais ce qui est certain, c'est que sans semences, il n'y a pas de production alimentaire. Voilà, ça c'est la base, je dirais. Donc effectivement, c'est là-dessus qu'il faut réfléchir et que la réglementation sur laquelle nous allons travailler et qui va démarrer le travail doit traduire à l'évidence les évolutions de ce que nous vivons dans ce contexte qui est nouveau par rapport à la législation ancienne. Donc qui pose des actes et des orientations différentes. Et effectivement, le modèle, je fais partie de ceux-là, qui pense que le modèle unique que nous connaissons doit de fait évoluer, non pas pour disparaître, évidemment, donc, mais pour laisser la place à d'autres approches, donc, vont nous animer, dans tous les cas, dans les débats qui vont suivre. Moi, j'ai organisé, le sujet est sérieux, et j'ai organisé mon propos rapidement autour de 5 principes et de 3 recommandations, voilà, pour essayer, pour faciliter aussi l'échange et les comptes rendus. Tout d'abord, je voudrais dire ici que les recherches et les expérimentations sur l'agroécologie nous montrent ô combien la capacité d'adaptation des semences à leur milieu. Ce qui n'est pas, un sujet évident pour certains, mais à l'évidence, c'est une réalité. Et au milieu et aux besoins des agriculteurs. Et je crois que c'est un ressort majeur de la réussite de la transition environnementale. Et je veux ici citer à la fois le matériel hétérogène, c'était un débat que nous avons eu dans le rapport sur le bio, mais également les mélanges d'espèces. C'est aussi partie donc des sujets. Ensuite, dire qu'à mesure que les connaissances en génétique évoluent, donc, on sait maintenant qu'il ne s'agit pas seulement de séquences d'ADN qui s'expriment dans les faits et que l'expression du génotype dépend de l'environnement dans lequel pousse le végétal et certains caractères épigénétiques peuvent être transmis. Troisième point, c'est la question de la protection de la biodiversité. Je crois qu'on ne peut pas se limiter à la question de la biodiversité remarquable. On parle souvent dans nos débats de l'ours, du lynx pour les animaux ou de telle ou telle orchidée. Je pense qu'il faut aller au-delà dans nos approches et dire que la biodiversité cultivée, dans le cas des plantes, ou élevée pour les animaux, sont aussi importantes, car on voit bien, et Martine y faisait référence, que c'est dans cette diversité, finalement, que l'on trouve notamment les traits génétiques qui expriment certaines capacités d'adaptation ou certaines résistances à des maladies. Ce qui permet, et c'est un sujet qui va nous occuper dans l'année qui vient également, de nous éloigner des recours systématiques aux pesticides de synthèse. Ce débat va démarrer et nous savons déjà qu'il va être important donc, et qui va permettre des véritables échanges à ce niveau. Il y a un point qui doit nous alerter, mais ça a été dit aussi pour partie, je crois que Dacian l'a évoqué, c'est la concentration que je qualifie vertigineuse du secteur de la semence. Je pense qu'il est, il est révolu, ça c'est mon point de vue, le temps où, effectivement, les semenciers ne fournissaient pas plus de 1% du marché. Aujourd'hui, je crois qu'on considère que 3 semenciers contrôlent, si mes informations sont bonnes, plus de 50% du marché mondial de la semence. Donc c'est un sujet quand même qu'on ne peut pas éluder et qu'il nous faudra bien donc aborder dans les discussions qui vont s'ouvrir. Je pense qu'il faut reconnaître et défendre, mais ça a été dit, les pratiques des agriculteurs, mais aussi des associations qui œuvrent pour la conservation de cette diversité génétique. C'est un sujet aussi qui, dans les règlements, devrait être pris en considération. Enfin, je pense important de traduire dans la législation qui va suivre donc, le droit des paysans à réutiliser et à échanger leurs semences, comme ça a été dit pour partie tout à l'heure. Je pense que ce droit, il est explicité dans l'article 19 de la Déclaration des Nations Unies sur le droit des paysans. Et je pense qu'on ne peut pas, nous, donc le passer sous silence. Et c'est une question majeure et centrale qui va venir dans les débats qui vont suivre au moment où nous allons travailler sur le rapport. Sur ces bases-là, j'ai 3 recommandations que j'ai formulées. Donc d'abord, sur le champ d'application, il semble important que les non-professionnels, ça c'est un point de vue voilà, à débattre, soient exclus de la réglementation. Je pense qu'il faut regarder, il faut savoir raison garder et voir les volumes que ça représente. Et ça permettrait de faire évoluer quand même des soucis, tu l'as évoqué tout à l'heure, de pseudo-concurrence qui n'en sont pas, donc de façon très claire. Mais je pense que ça sera plus intéressant si c'est dans les textes, bien sûr, qui se présentent donc à nous. Ensuite, je pense qu'il faut définir 2 cadres distincts selon que la vente des semences soit ou non l'activité principale du vendeur. C'est un sujet aussi qu'il faudra aborder dans la précision. Et enfin, je crois que, et nous on l'a abordé longuement dans le bio, que la reconnaissance, et je le répète, du matériel hétérogène doit être poursuivie. C'est-à-dire que ces semences qui ne sont ni homogènes, ni stables, mais qui sont pour autant très utiles dans ce que nous évoquons, doivent être prises en considération. Nous avons fait un pas considérable, je crois, pour ce qui est de l'agriculture biologique. Donc je parle sous contrôle de Martine, de Norbert en particulier, donc qui étaient présents dans ces débats-là. Je pense qu'il convient de faire la même chose. Donc, pour l'agriculture conventionnelle. Voilà, je crois que c'est un sujet qui sera majeur de mon point de vue et qui doit être au cœur des discussions que nous allons ouvrir. Voilà les quelques propos que je voulais mettre en complément de ce qui a été dit par mes collègues.
Merci beaucoup, Eric. Maintenant, je vais pas parler de l'extrême droite. Anja Hazekamp, it's very nice to have you with us, and I know you have been interested in this theme since a long time, so please give us your view on the future of seed marketing.
Thank you, Hannes. Yes, and first I'd like to welcome everyone here who shows interest in this very important topic. When we look at extreme left on the other side of the table, Norbert started his speech and he spoke about extremes and that we were both very much apart when we look at our positions. But I think we both agree that our food system needs to be drastically reformed to function within the planetary boundaries. And I was the ENVI rapporteur on the Farm to Fork initiative report of the Parliament. And together with the Agri Committee rapporteur from the EPP group, we managed to get a really balanced and good report that this underlines the need to reform our food system. So I think the extremes, when you look, you can easily find the different opinions, but I think there are also a lot of things where we do agree upon. And seeds are the foundation for farming and the beginning of our food supply chain. And we need seeds to grow into resilient crops that are able to withstand the pressures of climate change, for instance. And we need a wide range of resilient varieties adapted to organic growing conditions so that we can get rid of our dependence on fertilizers, pesticides, and fossil fuels. And at this moment, this wide range of varieties does not exist, or not for everyone. European seed diversity has suffered a drastic decay in the recent decades, and 90% of the crop varieties have disappeared from our farmers. Genetic diversity in our crops is necessary for global food security, and it is crucial for the biodiversity of our planet. And the current regulation on seeds only caters the needs of the agricultural industry. The standardized varieties for industrial production are being favored over traditional varieties, while these traditional varieties are key to growing resilient crops and enhancing biodiversity. So right now, the intellectual property rights on seeds are being protected and commercial seed systems are being promoted. Living processes, plants, animals, they should never be patented, in my opinion, never been intellectual property. And patents in the seed sector support only monopoly for multinationals in our food systems. And Martin already mentioned a few, think of Monsanto, BASF, Bayer. They should be, this system should be stopped as soon as possible. And we need a system change, not only for the seed market, but on many levels. And we need to work with nature instead of against nature. We need to simplify the registration and certification requirements that small-scale growers can easily introduce seeds on the market. And this should not impair the quality of seeds or compliance with organic practices. Farmers and growers, they have the most experience with locally adapted varieties, and that knowledge should enable them to take a share in this market as well. And they should not be washed away by the large multinationals. I think we should put our trust into biology and ecosystems, and instead of technology and chemistry. And finally, I think it is important that organic seeds are recognizable, that they are also not contaminated, available and affordable as well. And this last part is important because it is only right, in my opinion, that the most sustainable option is also the most affordable option. And this is very important if we want to achieve the goals of the Farm to Fork strategy that says we need to increase the organic land in Europe with 25% in 2030. So some countries are almost there. Other countries, as my own country, the Netherlands, well, we have a long way to go. We are now almost at 3%. And I think this conference is a great way to discuss the solutions in the field that we need in the field and the policy changes that are necessary for a seed system that is compliant with a sustainable food system.
Thank you very much, Anja. You can see this broad range of party opinions on the same thing is not that far away from what we've heard today as the challenge and the solutions. We have lots of proposals of how to solve the problems. Now, when it comes to the legislative decisions, the details will come up, and then the unity will perhaps not be exactly the same. But that's the game. That's exactly what we have to do to bring, like we did, and I must say, my own experience was, if people have understood, if politicians have understood the necessity of working together, it can work. We did it on the organic regulation across the board between all the different parties. And we got a success. I think that is a good example to try the same thing with the seed market regulation. I thank you all for being here. I was told to manage this session and also the next one, and I immediately have to apologize that as I'm out of this parliamentary machine, I'm out of time. I tell you what's going to happen. We have the interpreters, and it's rightly so, only for 3.5 hours. And at 17:30, we are supposed to close the session, and we still have a panel in front of us. So I hope you have you are kindly allowing that from 17:30 we will only continue working in English. Interpretation will be gone at that moment. I hope that's okay for the panelists and for everybody else. If there is a need for translation, my experience was there can be built groups of chuchotage for people who really need an interpretation from English into their language. So I apologize. I'm kind of carrying out a concept which was pretty packed. But I think it was very good that we had all the MEPs here, not only for a moment and nice word, but I could hear a real engagement. And I'm very happy that this was possible. Thank you all for this panel. Sure. So we are moving into the next session. Thank you all. I would like to give you a little which also Ask the panelists to come to the stage. So it's Mrs. Mana Kopi. I think she's already on her way. Lorenz Bonafos, Clara Beer, Cesar Gonzalez, super. Das geht in Englisch, oder? Martin Sommer, Alessandra Turco, and Magdalena Prida. Yeah, we're kind of doing a little pause, but I think it's good to stretch out and enjoy. And I would like to Laurence, c'est Laurence Bonafos. Nice to have you here. There's one more key there. And I think your place is here. Ah, Turco. One more. Wait a minute. We have to. Pas oui place. So I think that we have to do it in a way. Vous parlez tout français? Français, anglais, ça va? Ok.
Moi, je parle français.
You have. Ah, c'est vous. Donc, je vous propose de prendre la parole tout de suite. Comme ça, on a l'interprétation. Et donc, vous prenez la place, vous faites...
Mais avant, vous allez dire quelque chose.
Ah oui, je vais. Mais vous êtes la première, comme ça, on fait le...
Je peux dire si, en fait, après, si quand à discutation avec l'organisation, je peux venir aussi traduire s'il faut.
Ah, mais c'est super gentil, c'est très gentil.
Ouais.
Oui. Oui, pour vous, après, quand vous avez parlé, après, que vous pouvez...
Parce que sinon, normalement,
We are finding lots of wonderful solutions. So we are missing one space here for one speaker, and we will do it the following way. I will just do a short introduction, and Mrs. Lorenz Bonafos, it's you, right? No, pardon, c'est Claire. Okay. You will speak right after me. Is that ça va? Vous prenez ma place. Et donc, vous faites votre interprétation en français, comme ça, on a vraiment toutes les contributions du panel au début. Ça va? Donc, je vous donne la parole tout de suite. Voilà, directement. Comme ça, on a résolu. Vous ne devez pas vous mettre là. Ça va?
Turco.
Madame. Voilà, vous avez la parole.
OK. Merci. Bonjour à toutes et tous. Moi, je suis paysan en Italie, donc mon point de vue, c'est un point de vue très lié à ce que c'est l'agriculture paysanne agroécologique. En effet, nous, dans notre terrain, on doit avoir une vision holistique de ce que c'est notre vie et notre relation avec l'environnement, avec la production et avec le monde de citoyennes qui mangent et qui entrent en relation avec nous. Et donc, pour nous, la transition agroécologique, c'est quelque chose qu'on vive jour à jour. C'est quelque chose qui n'est pas seulement partie de plans stratégiques nationaux, c'est quelque chose qui n'est pas contenu juste dans la nouvelle PAC, mais c'est quelque chose qui est dans notre réalité, on va trouver jour à jour. Et pour faire face à ça, pour nous, est fondamental de pouvoir produire notre propre semence, de pouvoir le faire à l'intérieur de ce que c'est notre capacité et modalité de production. En effet, nous, on produit dans notre terrain, et là, quand on fait la production, on fait aussi la sélection des semences qu'après, on va remployer l'année après, des semences qu'on va échanger dans notre réseau, et donc des semences qui sont ce qui garantissent vraiment la souveraineté alimentaire de notre territoire. Quand on parle toujours de ce que c'est la souveraineté alimentaire et pas seulement de la sécurité alimentaire. Parce que c'est vrai que pour mettre en sécurité alimentaire notre population, il faut avoir un système de production dans les territoires, qui soit un système réactif et qui soit un système capable de faire face à ce que sont les défis actuels et du futur. Donc là, si on a notre propre semence, on pourra vraiment s'adapter à ce qui sont les changements climatiques, on pourra vraiment s'adapter à ce qui sont les attaques des parasites et des pathogènes. Quand on emploie des semences qui sont des semences reliées au monde du commerce, qui sont des semences qui viennent de l'agriculture industrielle, on doit s'adapter à la typologie des semences qu'on emploie. Quand on utilise notre propre semence, là, sommes-nous qu'on va adapter à notre système de semences la production. Donc c'est tout à fait une chose qui fonctionne au contraire. C'est tout à fait notre capacité et possibilité de produire qui devient l'opportunité d'avoir une nourriture saine et compatible avec l'environnement. Donc là, pour nous, quand on parle de durabilité, on parle toujours de durabilité des systèmes agricoles et pas seulement de la semence. Parce que pour nous, c'est tout un système de connexion qui n'existe pas détaché de la réalité des choses. Je crois de n'avoir plus de temps, j'imagine.
Oui, parce que tout le monde en parle.
Voilà. Donc je dois...
Merci Alessandra. C'est un peu spécial. C'est un peu spécial, mais c'est très bien. C'est un panel ad hoc et je crois qu'on va faire comme ça. On va continuer avec des brèves réactions, comme réaction à notre débat d'aujourd'hui et des perspectives que nous voyons dans le contexte du développement du nouveau règlement qui est en route, qui se présente. Donc, je vais donner tout de suite la parole à Madame Anarkopi, si vous voulez bien. Et on va, je crois, à partir de 17h30, switcher en anglais, mais on peut le faire tout de suite. J'ai repris le français maintenant, mais si tout le monde est d'accord, on va continuer en anglais. Merci.
Oui, grand merci, Yannis.
Grazie, grazie.
So, many thanks for the invitation to this panel, and this is really great input for the Commission for its exercise on reflecting on the options for the future legislation. We have been discussing today about all kinds of categories of varieties and material, but I want to shortly address new improved varieties, our intention, because Mrs. Hazekamp clearly said we need a transformation of our food system to be more sustainable. We have very ambitious goal in United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, but also Green Deal Farm to Fork strategy. We have the clear targets of reducing pesticides, increasing area of organic production, and reducing use of fertilizers. So that's why the Commission is reflecting for its variety testing process for new improved varieties that we would put more weight on sustainability aspects like disease resistant, heat tolerance that will play an important part in climate change, use less water, more not only yield but yield stability. So we need to look at the system for the new improved varieties, which is the biggest part on the market. But having said that, already over 10 years ago, on the basis of studies carried, EU-funded studies in UK, we learned about heterogeneity. Yeah? So we learned that when you put together like the best 10 varieties, you grow it over a long time, you will get material which has maybe a yield that it's a little bit lower than the best variety, but it's more heterogeneous. It is more resistant to diseases and to environmental conditions. And that's why, inspired by these studies, we started together with the member states a temporary experiment on heterogeneous material on populations that run over 7 years. And this also inspired us to offer solutions when the organic regulation was negotiated. So we have been working on this less uniform, more heterogeneous material. And on the basis of this temporary experiment, the most part is used for organic production, but like was mentioned by Mr.
epoxy, there's also interest for marginal areas and low input conditions, so also for non-organics. We are working on less stringent DOS requirements for organic varieties and adapted VCU requirements for organic varieties. And this is something you learn today. We are working on a derogatory approach, and this is something we will look to take up. Conservation varieties were mentioned today a number of times. We know we need to have less stringent requirements. We are reflecting to getting rid of the quantitative restrictions, even though we were trying to get information from member states about the quantities, but it seems maybe this is could be anyway a limiting factor. We are looking on to get rid of the marketing in the region of origin, etc. What we have learned today, and also in consultations and discussions with stakeholders, is that it seems that on the basis of conservation varieties and maybe also on other materials, there's a need to have material that does not fulfill the DOS, especially the uniformity requirements, and it should be allowed to adapt to local conditions. So this is something we are also looking into, and this could be something very new. These are a lot of different categories. We have also been studying the Swiss model on the niche varieties, whether we could have one way on this and one terminology. Then the exchange in kind. This is something we are looking into it on the basis of the French approach. So exchange in kind of seed in somehow mutual aid. We are looking into this issue. We need to see how it's possible to make it work without having to impact on the seed certification system. But it was shown today how important this is. Then on the issue of marketing to final consumers, this is an important part of the revision. We made a study which showed, with the help of external contractor, that yes, the consumers want to have more choice, more diversity. However, they also like to have quality. And we know that there are parts in Europe where people rely on the vegetables that they grow in their garden. So we need to ensure some minimum quality for these people. So this is in short, and we are, like Dorothea Andrea said, we are available there to discuss, to exchange, and this event today is an important part for us for our stakeholder consultations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Manakropi. There are lots of already lights flickering of things which the Commission might propose. We're very interested to see that. We have another representative of the Commission from the General Directorate Agriculture, Laurence Bonafos. Perhaps you could complement from the point of view of agriculture and not from the santé, but I know you always work closely together, so you will not say anything different, but perhaps complementary to what your colleague was just saying. Please.
Thank you, Hannes. And thank you for inviting us. So during the meeting, the example of organic was often quoted, which is very pleasant for us, even as Hannes mentioned, and as the MEP present know, it was a very, I would say, long and sometimes painful process to achieve these results. And now with the colleagues of DG Santé, we have an legislative act that basically give a frame to place on the market organic heterogeneous plant reproductive material. And also the colleagues of DG Santé just said that they are going to work further on organic varieties and how we can basically characterize. And here I just want to say that organic in general is something where you have a frame. It's a management system, you have a certification, you have a logo, So which means that when people are going to buy, these seeds or these plant reproductive material, there is a whole system behind. There is a certification system. There is a control system. This gives guarantees. And I think for me, the challenges that we will have is that when you put something out of the scope, yes, it gives you freedom, but the fact that we have this whole certification control in organic give us, the backbone that when people are going to buy, there is something behind. And I think this is something that should be also useful, in the further discussion. Another thing that I want to highlight is that in organic, and especially with the goal under, the farm to fork strategy to increase to 25% of organic land, we have a lack of seeds, and we still depend on so-called conventional seeds because we have also a system of derogations. So we want to phase it out, but I mean that we cannot afford, and I think it's clear from the debate we had, we cannot afford to have, two sectors, fighting between each other because we depend on each other. And to add on this, I think what with the Common Agricultural Policy, there are other schemes that are aiming to develop biodiversity, to be greener, like the eco schemes, and I think we should make room for them also in this legislation. So I think there is a lot of things. And when we work on the legislation on organic, we also look a lot at research programs, the results of the research program. And when we look at it, especially the results of EcoBreed or live seeds, we see that there is a lot of research that needs to be done. There is a lot of work in front of us. So I'm glad I see that there are a lot of different organizations, associations, but we will need you and we will need a lot of research to move forward because there is a market and we need to be able to provide something that will be suitable for our ambitions. So that's something that I wanted to add. And I want to finish maybe with something that's, for me, what I see as some, major challenges. Because when you look at, biodiversity and, when you look at research projects, what is coming out is often that you have to have the seeds or the plant reproductive material, they are adapted to certain, what we call, climatic conditions, soil, etc. And how are you going to have these results? And we had this thinking for the organic heterogeneous plant reproductive. How are you going to reproduce these very local results, at a larger scale? And are you going to address this? Are you going to put on the market suitable for this kind of climatic conditions? I mean, it's something that we need to think about, and it's not so easy to solve. And I want to thank you very much because the meeting was very, very interesting.
Thank you very much. It sounds like an invitation, and as I had already the feeling between the political parties, there is a wish to cooperate because everybody considers seeds and the development in connection, of course, with all the challenges we now face every day. That interest is there. And now hearing the same from the Commission, I think that is good news for the work ahead. I would like now to invite Cesar Gonzalez. You are representing the Euroseed sector. So you hear a lot about the past. You hear a lot about what should be very different. And I think your sector had to get a feeling of what's happening now. You are specifically dealing, if I understand well, with the association's Organic Seeds Working Group. So I think you might feel a bit like in a split, between the interests of an organization that has been in the market and quite dominant for some time, and on the other hand, seeing the opportunities and the challenges that lie in the organic seed production. So would you give us your impression of today? This is the panel about your impressions and your thoughts. I would like to hear yours. Cesar, yours is the floor.
Thank you very much. I had prepared something, but I will go to some of the quotes that have been said during this panel or before in the previous presentations. I would like to start by dispel one myth that has been mentioned several times today. It's that all varieties perform better than the new ones in terms of pest and diseases tolerance and resistance. That is not true. And just from a logic point of view, if you consider how much money the companies invest in finding tolerances and resistance to pests and diseases, if the old varieties would perform better, those companies would be out of business tomorrow. And that is not true, because the new ones perform better. So this one I wanted to mention because that struck me a bit during the debate. The second one, and I disagree with Päivi on the way we see the report on the populations, the 7-year temporary experiment. The conclusions of the report, from our point of view, do not support the conclusion that populations perform better.
No, I didn't say that.
No. That is good, because I was a bit shocked, because the report, and I invite everyone to read it, clearly says that there are a lot of challenges for the populations, and that in any case can't be said that they perform better or that they are better adapted. But just because I was a bit shocked on that, but perfect. And then on the in-kind exchange, well, in-kind exchange is marketing. And when it comes to marketing, I would say that there are at least few things that are conditions sine qua non. One is the identity, the second is the performance and the quality, and the third one would be the plant health. We can discuss the different types of need for organic heterogeneous material, for varieties, etc. But in all the cases, those three elements are basic ones, especially the plant health, because the risk of propagating seed-borne diseases is high, and the cost of doing that is even higher. I wanted also, now coming to the organic, let's say, area, and information to the consumers. Information to consumers, from our point of view, it's basic one. You need to inform your customers. But imagine that you are selling organic heterogeneous material that has been bred conventionally and has been multiplied under organic conditions. You would call it organic heterogeneous material. If you have bred a variety conventionally and multiplied under organic conditions, you should be in the same position. You should call that organic variety. And sometimes it wasn't clear during today's debate. So this equal footing between the two, I think it's very necessary. For conservation varieties and the link to the geographical area where they have been produced, why does it matter? Because they are locally adapted. I think Ms. Bonafort referred to that, and she's totally right. Those varieties are there as conservation varieties because they are specifically for a local environment. If you move it somewhere else, you're doing something else. So this matters. And the last point, to finish on a more positive note, I agree on something that I think it was Barbara who mentioned that, about when you register a variety, how do you compare the variety that you're trying to register with existing varieties? And then she referred, of course, you can't compare, I think it was a population with a hybrid. That is totally understandable. I think there is a lot of room for improvement there, probably with member states. Where I differ with Barbara probably is that from our point of view, changing the rules to accommodate that, it's maybe not necessary. Work with member states in order to improve the situation in member states today. I think that would solve many issues without the need of changing the rules that work well. I will stop there. I have more, but I think I covered quite.
Thank you very much, Cesar. Yeah, I would have been surprised if we wouldn't have got some points where we disagree or where we still need to discuss and find out what the right way is. But of course, the interface between things changing with climatic conditions, with the society wishing more diversification, not just on the market, but in general, then of course you have to find your way. I remember that exactly the points you mentioned as the one of what is an organic variety. Is it a conventional one that is regrown organically? That exactly was the exception in the organic regulation for a long time, and that is now going to be changed. Whether that's immediately or in a few years, but that is on the track of being changed. But I think we shouldn't go too much. We could open a big debate. It was good that you made your point here. I would like now to ask Clara Beer, Head of Policy and Public Relations in the Biodynamic Federation Demeter International, to come with her opinion about this day and what you think about all the contributions.
Yes, thank you, Hannes. Perhaps just a bit an introduction about our organization. As you heard, we have a very long name. Basically, we stand for the biodynamic farming movement worldwide, but we also represent the Demeter trademark that certifies biodynamic products at the international level also. And we count among our members several biodynamic vegetable and cereal growers with whom we collaborate closely and work together. And yes, it has been mentioned a couple of times again today, but I would like to stress it. I have learned that the more you repeat something, the more it sinks in. So I would like also to say that we consider that it's very important that this new regulation that is on the table at the moment and that we are discussing today considers organic varieties that are suitable for organic production. And here I would like to stress again that it's very important that there is a streamlining between the organic regulation, the new one, and this future seed marketing reform, that we build upon the improvements of this new organic regulation, both with the legal framework for organic varieties that are adapted for organic production, but also, of course, with a notification procedure for organic heterogeneous material, which will be a huge asset for us and on which our biodynamic vegetable and cereal growers are already working at the moment. As we discussed today, we are facing actually a huge lack of organic varieties that we need to address very rapidly if we want to reach the target of the 25% organic farming set out in the Farm to Fork strategy. For that, we need to ensure the availability of seeds from organic varieties on the market and develop further varieties that are adapted to local and organic growing conditions. This is really crucial. We need to ensure that we have seeds with high genetic diversity if we want to address both the biodiversity loss, but also climate resilience, that are both aspects that were also mentioned today, but are absolutely crucial. And I think that one path to address this lack of organic varieties will be to look into the registration criteria. So here it has also been mentioned that we need more flexibility in the DUS and VCU criteria for organic varieties, especially for the open pollinated vegetable varieties. But in general, regarding the registration processes, we must really ensure that we have no new bureaucratic and administrative burden, no additional costs for our growers that are really trying to comply with all the criteria but are struggling here with huge administrative burden. And one last point I would like to make is also considering the registration, that it's very important that the basis for the registration remains the phenotype of the plants, so that we can ensure a level playing field between all the operators. As much as we consider that the biomolecular techniques might be interesting for research, also for breeding purposes, they should not be introduced in a registration process, but only remain as an option, as it's the case today. This is because, well, many small breeding initiatives do not have access to these techniques, or also do not want to use them, but especially also because in yields, the quality, and we have many complex parameters that cannot be measured through these techniques. So here I would really insist that the basis for the registration must remain the phenotype of plants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clara. That was very clear. I have two more waiting panelists. I'm sorry, really, that we are running, or have already run out of the normal time. But I have the feeling I will not need any extra time for summing up, because you are doing the job of summing up with your reactions. But I will still sum up at the end a little bit. So I would like to ask Martin to take the floor, and then at the very end, Magdalena will intervene and give us a little feedback from your side. Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Hannes. I've already had the pleasure to talk today, so I'm going to be concise. And I'm going to, say, like, from the perspective of the organic movement, what would be a good seed rules review, and what are the three aspects that it would have to deliver on to be good from our point of view. And this also brings into some of the points that were mentioned today by the panelists and also by the presentations. So first of all, we should make it easier to bring varieties on the market that do benefit agrobiodiversity and that are well adapted to the organic conditions. And there we can actually work within this already established variety system that has been is well known by farmers and breeders. But we have seen suggestions, and we support these, to make adaptations to the VCO&US system whenever it makes sense, and whenever these varieties are cultivated in a context, in an organic farming context, then it makes sense to have adapted criteria. And this is also our hope, will stimulate small and medium-sized breeders also to breed organic varieties, to make their lives easier as well. And maybe also some of the bigger companies even could be interested in bringing these organic varieties on the market. We actually do think that there's a lot to contribute also from this sector. The other key point is, and this relates to the proposal that we've seen today, the Swiss proposal about the niche varieties, and there we actually don't like so much the wording niche varieties. We think that diversity varieties is actually a better name for it, because we need those pathways for registering varieties that are separate from those established and classical variety pathways. And this hosts conservation varieties that are adapted to local and climatic conditions, but that are not necessarily relevant for the whole EU, but that are more interesting maybe in a local context, and then also the heterogeneous material. And then finally, and this relates to the transparency point that was raised today, we need to test the behavior, or if you want to use the word performance, of varieties under organic conditions. And this is happening now usually under conventional conditions. It should happen, it really should be our ambition that we go towards testing varieties under organic conditions. And why? Because not only organic farming, but also the whole EU wants to reduce inputs, pesticides and fertilizers. We want to increase organic land. So we need to know which varieties perform well under organic conditions, and that's why we need the mandatory or the goal to have at some point all testing also done under organic conditions and not only conventional conditions. So yeah, with this I would like to summarize and end my summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. So Katrin is ill. I give the floor to Magdalena, even if she had already a part, but I think it's important that you react to the discussion of the day.
Thank you very much, Hannes, and I'll keep it short and just some free reflections on what has been said today I want to share with you for the end. So what we heard is that we see that the current legislation is implemented very differently in different countries. And we see that there are more permissive regimes in some countries. For example, when it comes to the sales to amateur gardeners in France or in Denmark, or when it comes to conservation varieties and farmers exchange in Austria. We see that in these countries where there are already at the moment more permissive regimes, there's absolutely no detriment to consumers or no problems in the market. And we do see that there's a really positive impact in those countries on seed diversity. So I think the first thing to consider is looking what works good somewhere and building on that and really improving on that. The second point, what has been mentioned today, is the seed marketing rules are really old. They date back to the 60s, and it's indisputable that the challenges which we are facing today are different challenges. So then seed marketing legislation must reflect that. We know at the same time that there are vested interests in the current system because a lot of players do benefit from the high barriers to the market entry and from the restrictions to the informal sector. Even knowing about those vested interests, I think it's important that we cannot allow them to dictate the changes that are upcoming. The reform must serve the society, the reform must serve the people on the ground, the reform must serve the environment, not vested interests of some few. And the last point, we saw that the European Parliament was crucial, and we hope and think that it will be crucial also in the future for promoting diversity. We saw that it dramatically rejected the prior proposal in 2014, and which would have further eroded really the freedoms of exchange and of selling diversity seeds. And so what we need, what we see now today is that also now we're very happy to have this cross-party support for this event today. And we think and we hope on a really renewed commitment from the Parliament to really bring this diversity back to the fields, to the gardens, to the plates, to support the rights of farmers, of gardeners, and really, and therefore I really want to thank also the MEPs who hosted this event today. A big thank you to Martin Häuslich, Eric Andrieu, Anja Hasekamp, Dacian Ciolos, and Norbert Linz. Great that you made this event possible, that you invited us all to the Parliament, that we can discuss this here even before the legislation will be discussed in the Parliament formally. We're very thankful for this, and I also want to say thank you in the end to our great moderator, Hannes, for taking over the moderation, also with this tight schedule. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, as I have the last word, I take it. And of course, I'm just feeling the same thing. Thank you to the members of Parliament who take their job very, very seriously. This is about democracy. This meeting is about democracy, listening to each other, having different opinions, welcoming changes in attitudes. I come back to my initial remark. I look back at a career of 35 years in the institutions. And when I started, the Parliament was tiny, like this. And it always just had to listen to the decisions of the Council of Ministers. Full stop. Nothing else. And then when we mentioned as Greens the first time organic farming, it was the joke in the Agriculture Committee. People thought these guys want to go back to the trees. Now it's 25% being discussed. Interesting. Times change, right? And the other thing that comes back to my mind is when we suggested to the Commission that the European Union should take care of agricultural biodiversity, it was immediately thought, that's something for specialists. That's competent authorities. That's research people who know. Now we know in this room are competent authorities, right? Competent authorities is the term the European Commission uses to say, well, let them do. They know, right? We know. We know. From practice, we know from political experience, we know from overcoming barriers of I don't talk to this guy, I won't talk to that guy. This meeting is about democracy. And if anybody has any kind of fear, European democracy is at stake, I think this is an example it's not. And I think the deputies who've made this possible, you who have contributed with all your knowledge, you are, I think now, the ones who have to take this further. This is not the end of the whole thing. This is the beginning of the discussion about this new regulation. And it will take time. And it will take a lot of efforts. There will be clashes and whatsoever. Don't fear. It's going to be good. My last thing is I want to apologize to you all to push you through an agenda which was extremely dense. You will have the possibility to look calmly into all the wealth which people have contributed here, and to look it through and to see, that will be available for you. And Alessandra, my excuse, I pushed you immediately into this session. Go ahead, you made that perfectly, and you have a help of interpretation, even if the time for the interpreters were over. Thank you very much for helping. That was it. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, and see you again at the next kind of meeting like this. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank.
Vielen Dank auch. Bon, avec ton équipe et toi, on va prendre un verre à un moment que